Yes, sir. Mr. Kurtz,
Here.
Mr. Strollo, Mr. Strollo.
His audio must not be working.
Okay, I see him. Gotcha. Me, Mr. Natale, Mr. Mercado,
Here.
Mr. Bowman,
Here.
Mr. Dawson,
Present.
Mr. Carderas,
Here.
Mr. Linder,
Here.
Mr. Tedisco, Mr. Anderson,
Here.
Ms. Downs, Mr. Selmont.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. Everybody want to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Got a flag up on the screen? Sorry, Matt, they're going to see that tie. I pledge allegiance to the flag, United States of
America,
to the republic, for which
which stands
one nation,
one nation,
Under God,
visible.
liberty and justice for all.
Okay, special, first order of business tonight is a special permit application for Labarge LLC member Jamie C. Ferguson. Can we get a call for that, please?
Yes, sir. The special permit application of Labarge LLC, member Jamie C. Ferguson, care of Matt Hall, Esquire, 195 South Main Street, Cheshire, Connecticut, 06410, to manufacture, sale of beer and brew pub, property located at 125 Commerce Court, Unit 7, Cheshire, Connecticut, 06410, as generally shown on Assessor's Map number 19, lot number 72, in an I-1 zone. Packet information is available for review on the town website homepage under documents distributed or displayed during virtual meetings.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I'd just like to read comments from the Cheshire Fire Department into the
I
record.
do.
Hold on.
Give
I
us
have
a-
to recuse myself from this.
Okay, Mr. Mercado's out, so we're gonna have both of our, and Mr. Tedesco is not here, so both of our alternates are going to be, Mr. Anderson and Mr. Selmont are gonna be in on this public. Now the floor is yours, Mr. Booker.
This is dated July 2nd, 2020, from Jack Kasner and Mike Kozlowski, Cheshire Fire Department, subject, no, that's the wrong one, 11, wait, wrong one, that was 11, that's the next one, hold on. Dated July 9th, 2020, subject is 125 Commerce Court, Unit 7. The Fire Department has reviewed the above application for the planning and zoning process. We recommend the following comments, stipulations. If this application is approved, code compliant plans must be submitted to the building official and fire marshal's office prior to construction. 1, providing building keys to the emergency key box will be required. And 2, the vehicle access around the building will need to be maintained at all times. And that's it, Mr. Chairman. No other outstanding comments.
Okay, thank you. Representing our applicant tonight.
Chairman, and thanks members of the commission. My name is Matt Hall, for the record, 195 South Main Street, Cheshire, and joining me tonight from my line of room is Ryan McAvoy to help walk us through the site plan as presented and revised during the pendency of the application. As Mr. Natale read into the record, this is an application by my client seeking special permit approval for the manufacturing and consumption of beer at the premises in accordance with the fairly newly amended regulation, section 30, schedule A, item 58 of the zoning regulations that your commission approved back in the spring. I submitted along with the application a letter dated, let's see, June 18th, addressed to EJ and of course submitted to the rest of you, I'm sure, outlining some of the salient points of the application, and the site plan, as Ryan will present, seeks to address a couple of the issues that I think are important to this commission and important to the applicant. As our letter indicates, the consumption of, the manufacture of the beer and the brewing on site will be in accordance with all state regulations regarding same, and the consumption of beer is contemplated along with the consumption of food to be vended by an outside food truck in 2 venues initially, based on the quarantine situation we're in, and an outdoor seating area scheduled or hopefully to accommodate 44 patrons, and then ultimately an indoor portion of the facility that would accommodate up to 48 patrons. I think primarily for the purpose of the site plan, much concern, rightfully so, centers on the outdoor dining portion and our efforts to make sure it's as safe as possible. Ryan, in a moment, will walk through the barrier presentation to keep patrons safe. That will also allow for vehicular and service access to and from the rear of the other neighboring unit occupants. And the other, I think, item of concern or interest to this commission and to the applicant as well is the parking situation. So the site plan hopefully will present the parking plan as we contemplated, which takes into consideration that the neighboring units are generally office type uses and will have parking demands that are not at peak at the same time as this facility would be. In other words, our parking demands will be more focused on the hours of 2 to 10 generally on weekends, and then later on the weeknights. So it's not anticipated that we're going to have much conflicting parking demand concerns at the premises. So that being said, we've sought to work with Mike Kozlowski and CFD as well as staff to accommodate any concerns with respect to the location of the food truck and the access, like I said, to the rear of those units, neighboring units, while keeping the patrons in an appropriately safe location to the rear of the unit itself. So with that being said, it's probably a good time to have Ryan walk through the site plan, which is not very complicated, I guess, and make ourselves available for any questions the commission may have.
Thank you, Matt. Can everybody hear me, first of all? Can everybody hear me? Okay, thank you. For the record, my name is Ryan McAvoy. I'm a licensed professional engineer with Mylona McBroom. And very briefly, the site plan that you have in front of you, essentially the goal is to maintain and use the existing parking area in the front of the building. This particular building on the south side of Commerce Court, just off of Highland Ave, contains 11 units, most of which are occupied right now by industrial or quasi-industrial sort of office space. And on our site plan, we provided a parking table demonstrating the parking demand for the other uses within the building currently. And we also calculated the demand for parking for the brewery, assuming the requirements of a restaurant. This may not exactly meet the definition of a restaurant, but it's the closest category near zoning regulations that we can apply to this site. The unit that they're looking to occupy is number 7, located in the western portion of the property. The indoor space will be approximately 1,200 square feet, indoor seating area. The remainder of the space will be dedicated to the brewing operation. And the outdoor seating area, which is shown to the rear of the building, is approximately 30 feet by 50 feet in size, which will leave substantial space to the rear of the seating area for vehicular travel to the rear of the building, some 28 feet in width. It will not obstruct the ability for any box trucks or any similar style vehicles to circulate around the back of the parking lot or make deliveries to the respective units. The area will be protected with jersey barriers on the exterior and mobile planter units on the inside with a gated access out to the food truck area. The food truck area is shown just as an example of where the food trucks can go. We do not want to encourage the food trucks to be in the parking area so that there's no conflict with this business and their patrons or other businesses. And the food truck area, of course, is completely mobile. These will all be vehicles. And the outdoor seating area will be essentially no permanent site improvements will be associated with it. Things can be relocated or shifted very quickly if need be, but it is designed in a manner to provide safety from any vehicles that may be in the back of that building during patron use, although we don't anticipate that that's going to be a very frequent occurrence. So lighting will be contained within the outdoor seating area itself, within overhead accent lighting and things of that nature. So it's going to be a fairly low key setup in the back. Again, very, very mobile in nature, nothing permanent. So we hope that they're successful, and there really isn't too much more for me to discuss in terms of the site plan. So if you have any questions for me or Attorney Hall, we'd be happy to answer them.
Okay, commission members, any questions on this application?
Yes.
Yeah, Woody Dawson, what will the hours be there?
Woody, it's anticipated that on the weekends, it would be 2 p.m. to 10 p.m. And then on the weekdays, I think it'd be 4 to 9 or 5 to 9. And the peak kind of anticipated hours during the week would be 6 to 9 p.m. So they, just to reiterate, 2 to 10 on Friday and Saturday, and then 5 to 9 on the weekdays.
Thank you very much.
Okay, anybody else with
Yes. Two quick questions. Matt, will there be entertainment there? So like, since it's going to be outside, will there be bands or anything playing outside?
I don't know that the applicant has gotten to the point where they anticipate having bands there. Ideally, that would be a nice feature. Of course, we have neighbors to consider there, and that would not be, let's say, part of their initial business plan, so to speak. But I think hopefully this will succeed, and there might be an opportunity for that. But right now, it's not part and parcel of what they're trying to do there.
Gotcha. And I asked that because I think up the road, the other brewery up the road, they've had some issues lately with some bands playing, and like I said, with the neighbors. So
yeah, I'm sorry, Jeff. Yeah, I think this site might not lend itself to that, but if there were an opportunity to work with the neighboring units and the surrounding neighborhood, so to speak, something lower volume, perhaps that might be something they're interested in, but it's not part of this kind of initiative.
Okay, thanks. And then with the licensing with the state, I know it's for beer, but is that licensing also allowed like distilled spirits or anything, or is this truly just to make beer?
This, the license from which this applicant, or via which this applicant will operate, is a beer license.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, anybody else from the commission looking to?
DJ,
Yes, Mr. Bone.
I don't see any parking in the rear. Will there be any parking in the rear allowed?
We don't anticipate any need for parking in the rear. There's no formal spaces back there. And frankly, it's other than where we're proposing the accent lighting or the outdoor area, there is insufficient lighting in the rear to really support any formal parking.
Do any of the businesses that are there now park in the rear?
Not based on my site visits, and it's not my understanding that they have any vehicles parked there permanently.
It's generally a loading area. We consider that a loading area. If they park there now, at the risk of their own loading area, we don't necessarily care about that. What we wouldn't want this user to do would be impair anybody's loading area. So, and they haven't done that, nor are they proposing to put any parking in the rear. So.
All right, anybody else? Mr. Bowman, that answers your question? Anybody else? I can't think, we have the thing up. I can't
Yes,
see
you
it.
did.
Anyone else in the commission have to ask any questions?
Mr. Kurtz?
Yes, Mr. Tedesco. I
Yes.
see your-
So most of the, I was muted. I didn't realize that I was muted before. Are you aware, Mr. Hall, whether most of the other businesses are closed on weekends?
I think they are best characterized as small businesses. And so I think there are occasionally users in those spaces, but I don't believe they're generally as a uniform rule open for business, so to speak. Most of those, and I'll defer to Ryan, who did a lot of the site visits and the evaluation of the neighboring units, but they are not high customer, high incidental traffic uses, if that makes sense. It might be office workers, so to speak, but not on a regular basis, as I understand it, unless Ryan needs to correct that. But that's our interpretation of the neighboring uses.
No,
Well,
these are,
Go ahead.
I don't believe these are customer-driven type establishments. It's primarily just the workers in those particular units that utilize the parking area for the most part.
But I
I
think,
think,
I'm
Mr.
sorry.
Hall,
Go ahead. I'm sorry, Lou.
no, that's right. Mr. Hall wrote, I think, that in fact, since your more intensive customer time during the week begins at 6 o'clock, in fact, most of the other businesses people may have gone home if they're offices or manufacturing facilities. I'm just thinking for parking purposes that you'll be using your property for the most intensive use when most of the other businesses are not going to require parking.
That's correct. I think, including on the weekends, I think the best way to describe it is they're formally, as I would, again, I don't represent any of these neighboring users or units, so I can't speak with 100% certainty, but they're generally office users and formally, if you will, not open necessarily on the weekends. So the weekend use, I think we're quite comfortable in saying there'll be virtually no competing parking demands. And I think during the week, as you just reiterated, Commissioner Tedesco, our anticipation is that the neighbors and their parking demands will decrease kind of customarily as the end of the traditional business day approaches, and our applicants' business uses will not demand parking until after those uses close.
And if
Thank
I
you.
could add something to that, the number of spaces that we calculated based on the zoning regulations fully complies regardless of hours of operation. So there's in that sense, there's adequate spaces per the regs. Although we do, again, as Matt said, believe with a fair degree of confidence that there's not going to be significant overlap in peak uses of the site, of the parking area.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? Questions, comments on this application? Any comments coming from the public? Bill?
No comments.
No comments. Thank you very much. All right, if you're all set, Mr. Hall, with this, we're going to close this public hearing.
Yep. Thank you very much for the opportunity. We appreciate it. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, guys. Moving on, number 2, special permit application of Brodash Copper Ridge LLC, accessory apartment. We hear the call for that, please.
Absolutely. The special permit application of Brodash Copper Ridge LLC, care of Anthony J. Fazzone Esquire, Fazzone Ryan and Ricciuti LLC, 2 Town Center, Cheshire, Connecticut, 06410, to establish an accessory apartment property located at 11 Copper Valley Court, Cheshire, Connecticut, 06410, as generally shown on Assessor's Map number 29, lot number 151 in an R40 zone. Packet information is available for review on the town website homepage under Documents Distributed or Displayed during virtual meetings.
Thank you. And representing the applicant tonight?
Yes, for Anthony Fazzone, with office here in Cheshire. And I think that the staff report pretty much summarizes this whole application. This is new construction, so it's very easy for the applicant to comply with the regulations. And in fact, this is basically for a single parent or one of the owners, just individual parent, and it's only 600 square feet. It has the 2 private entrance and connected to the rest of the property, the rest of the house. And as I think as Mr. Volker's memo points out, it complies in all respects to the accessory apartment section of the regulations.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments from commission members on this application?
Woody Dawson's pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah, this is a pretty good one. So,
Chairman, if
I
I may, I do have to read comments into the record.
Great.
Hold on. This is dated July 2nd, 2020, 11 Copper Valley Court. The fire department has reviewed the above application for the planning and zoning process. We recommend the following common stipulations. If this application is approved, code compliance plans must be submitted to the building official and fire marshal's office prior to construction. And one, a fire alarm system shall be installed so that occupants of both dwelling units are notified of a smoke or fire condition in the other. That's it, Mr. Chairman. No other comments.
Okay. Mr. Fazone, if you're all set, I'm going to close this public hearing.
Yep, thank you.
Okay, I'm going to close this public hearing. I'm going to use the right that I have to, I'm going to recess our public hearing and open our regular meeting just to act on items number 1 and 2 that we heard tonight. The time is 7:52. And if we could, I would assume, so we're in our regular meeting now. I'd like to call the regular meeting of our planning and zoning commission. And I'm going to forgo everything and we'll go right down to number 1 and ask if we have a motion for Labarge LLC.
We do, Mr. Chairman. Special permit application for manufacturer's permit for beer and brew pub at 125 Commerce Court. The Cheshire Planning and Zoning Commission find that the proposed manufacturer's permit for beer and the establishment of a brew pub at 125 Commerce Court is shown on plans entitled Site Plan Cheshire Brewery, 125 Commerce Court, Cheshire, Connecticut, dated July 7, 2020, are consistent with Section 30 Schedule A, Item 58A, and Section 40 Special Permits of the Cheshire Zoning Regulations, and hereby approve this application conditioned upon compliance with comments from the Cheshire Fire Department dated July 9, 2020.
Woody Dawson moves that wordings.
Moved by Wood.
Second.
By Mr. Natale. Now remember, before we do discussion, Mr. Belmont and Mr. Anderson, you were both involved on this. Any discussion on this motion?
Again, Woody Dawson, pretty self-explanatory also.
Yeah, it's a great addition to Cheshire. I hope they do very well.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
Yeah, thanks for coming to Cheshire. Exactly. Okay, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? And anyone abstaining? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much and good luck to you.
Thank you, commission members. We appreciate it. Thanks. Good luck tonight.
Thanks,
Thank
Ben.
you.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to number 2. Do we have a motion for the Copper Valley
Yes,
Court?
Mr. Chairman, special permit application for accessory apartment, 11 Copper Valley Court. The Cheshire Planning and Zoning Commission find the proposed accessory apartment, 11 Copper Valley Court, are shown on plans entitled Copper Valley Subdivision Lot 2, revised through June 5th, 2020, are consistent with the requirements of the Cheshire zoning regulations, and hereby approve this application conditioned upon compliance with comments from the Cheshire Fire Department dated July 7th, 2020.
Woody Dawson moves that wording.
Second.
Marvin, second. Mr. Ricardo. Okay, Mr. Tedesco, I do know you're here, but I wasn't sure you were here for the start of the brewery one. That's why we had the 2 alternates come in to vote. But I believe everybody here for this one, the regular commission is here. There should not be any alternates at all on this one at all. So any discussion on this motion?
Makes sense.
It's real easy. New construction, and it's nothing big. So all those in, I'm sorry, go
Again,
ahead.
it's self-explanatory, Woody Dawson.
Yep. Okay. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Anyone abstaining? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you all. Okay. So at that point now, yes, Mr. Duffin?
I want to thank you. I thought that was very good of you as chairman to take
Yeah,
those full applications first, because it's only fair to make them not sit there all night. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good job as always.
Thank you, Woody. Okay, so with that, I will be recessing our special meeting and going back to our public hearing at 8:56 with the same people in. So with that, can I hear?
7:56.
I'm sorry, 7:56. Can I hear the call for the zone map change petition of Lamp Realty LLC and the special permit application of Lamp?
Yep, we're gonna do both together, you said, right?
Yes, please.
Okay. The zone map change petition of Lamp Realty LLC, care of Joseph P. Williams Esquire, Shipman and Goodwin LLP, 265 Church Street, Suite 1207, New Haven, Connecticut 06510, to change the zone of property located at 50 Hazel Drive, Cheshire, Connecticut 06410, assessor's map number 15, lot number 52, from the present special adaptive reuse development district R80 to affordable housing development section 44A of the Cheshire zoning regulations. Property description of 50 Hazel Drive, available for review on the town website homepage under documents distributed or displayed during virtual meetings and filed in the Cheshire Town Clerk's office. Second one is the special permit application of Lamp Realty LLC, care of Joseph P. Williams Esquire, Shipman and Goodman LLP, 265 Church Street, Suite 1207, New Haven, Connecticut 06510, to construct a 114 unit affordable housing development in 2 residential buildings under section 44A of the Cheshire zoning regulations. Property located at 50 Hazel Drive, Cheshire, Connecticut 06410, as generally shown on assessor's map number 15, lot number 52, in the proposed affordable housing development zone. Packet information is available for review on the town website homepage under documents distributed or displayed during virtual meetings.
Thank you very much. Before we start this public hearing, I just wanted to let everyone know that the Zoom meetings that we're doing here, yes, they're tough, but because of the governor's executive order, we are not allowed to have these larger public hearings in our town hall. And it was not the planning and zoning's decision to do it this way. We consulted with the town staff and our town attorney, and what we've come up with is this is our only viable option to conduct these meetings. So wanted to get that out on the table before. There was a lot of talk that other things were going on, but this is the way the meetings are supposed to be done. Everything is legal about it, and this is the way we're going forward until we get any other advice from the governor or our attorney. And it's just, this is the way that it's going to be. With that, do we have anyone on call here representing Lamp Realty?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I'd like to read the comments in from police, fire, and engineering.
Sure. Yep. Go right ahead.
Joe Williams, that's okay?
Of course.
Dated July 9, 2020, planning and zoning from the Cheshire Fire Department, 50 Hazel Drive. The fire department has reviewed the above application for the planning and zoning process. We recommend the following common stipulations. If this application is approved, code compliance plans must be submitted to the building official and fire marshal's office prior to construction beginning. 1, please provide a truck turning movement plan for the site. Mountable curb will need to be installed in several internal parking areas to be determined by the fire chief. 2, the locations of the large planting trees and light poles will need to be coordinated with the fire department to ensure emergency vehicle access. 3, the dimensions of the proposed island will need to accommodate the turning of the fire apparatus. 4, standpipes will be installed in all stairways and possibly in locations to be determined by the fire chief in the underground parking areas. 5, the ventilation fans for the underground garage will need to be reversible and have fire department override controls. 6, the proposed water main layout will need to be improved to conform with town standards to include a looped water main to both buildings and fire hydrants at the entrance to each underground parking garage. 7, 1 fire hydrant must be placed within 50 feet of each fire department connection for the required sprinkler and standpipe systems. 8, a key box system approved by the fire department will need to be installed on each building with access keys provided for all portions of the buildings. 9, all parking will need to be in designated parking spaces. No parking allowed in the roadways internal to the development. Appropriate signage will be required. 10, all stair towers, corridors, and separation between the underground garage and first floor shall be a minimum of 2-hour rated construction. That's the end of the fire comments. I have comments from Cheshire Police Chief dated April 29, 2020. Bill, I have some concerns related to the traffic generated by this development. In this case, I don't think my concerns will be the most important consideration here because the project impacts a state road, and I think the state DOT will have to weigh in. I do not have the technical knowledge to refute anything in Maloney McBroom's report. I would note that they are technically correct that at the intersection of Hazel Drive and Waterbury Road, there's only one eastbound and one westbound lane. However, I think it is important to note that the westbound lanes narrow from 2 to 1 just east of Hazel Drive. It is not uncommon to see cars side by side attempting to merge into one lane within the boundaries of the intersection. I would also note that there are multiple ways for people exiting proposed development to leave. In addition to going south on Hazel directly to Waterbury Road, vehicles can also go north on Hazel and then travel on Hillside Avenue or Mayview Avenue to reach Waterbury Road. In the big picture, that is possibly a positive as it will allow for some options to manage the traffic flow and patterns. Anecdotally, I offer the following. When approaching the intersection traveling south on Hazel Drive, there is a significant rise in the roadway leading to the intersection. Traffic waiting on Hazel Drive to turn into Waterbury Road will have traction issues in inclement weather, particularly snow and ice. In spite of the fact that there is a minimal accident history in the immediate area, our experience is that this area does have significant congestion, especially during the commuter rush hours. When westbound traffic stacks up at the traffic signal at the intersection of Waterbury and Byam, it frequently reaches Hazel Drive. This will significantly impact the sight line for traffic exiting Hazel Drive and attempting to turn left onto Waterbury Road eastbound. It will also impact cars traveling east on Waterbury Road and attempting to turn left onto Hazel Drive. A westbound car can yield the right of way to the turning vehicle, while another westbound car can get by using the shoulder. I'm not sure of the process to get state DOT involved in this review, but I certainly think they should be. Please let me know if you need any further input from the police department. Thank you, Neil Tribe. And finally, from the town engineer dated June 15, 2020. This was for inland wetlands and planning and zoning. From the engineering department, we have reviewed the redevelopment plans revised to May 29, 2020. The engineer's response later dated June 3, 2020. We take no exception to the site development plans or drainage design based on the new information provided. We do recommend that the old existing storm drainage pipes and structures proposed to be retained in service beneath the redeveloped site be carefully inspected by the engineer of record prior to construction, with a report on the system suitability for reuse to be submitted for approval by the town engineer. Should any or all system components require repair or replacement, a licensed professional engineer shall provide the design specifications for review and approval. The engineering department must be notified in advance to inspect any drainage system modifications made within the town drainage easement, and an as-built survey of the storm drainage system serving Hazel Drive is required prior to the endorsement of certificates of occupancy. That's all we have, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Natale, do you have something before they start?
Yeah, just point of information. We have right now 35 accounts watching on YouTube. And I'd just like to point out that anybody who's watching, if you have a question as we're going through, in the notice for the meeting, there is an email address. And Bill, what's the email address? Bill, do you have it? Sorry. I've got it handy. I'm sorry. It's comments@cheshirecT.org. So if anybody has any questions, they can email them in. And then when the chair brings up the public comment section, they'll be addressed.
Thank you, Jeff.
Yep.
Mr. Williams, I assume you'll be representing out there?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good evening, commission members. Is the sound okay on this? I can't hear you now, Mr. Chairman.
Sorry about that. Woody, you have a mute on yours? Or could you find a mute on yours? There's a lot of background noise. I'm just wondering if it's coming from you.
I don't know. Find somebody else to blame. I have nothing on there. I said that earlier when we started.
Okay. Okay, Mr. Williams, you're all set.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and commission members. I just want to start off saying, Mr. Chairman, I agree with what you said at the outset. I and my team would all like to be with you all in person as well. We appreciate you conducting the hearing in this fashion, and everything that I've seen the town of Cheshire doing in wetlands and in zoning has complied completely with the governor's executive orders. So we thank you for that. My name is Joe Williams. I am a land use and environmental attorney of 25 years with the law firm of Shipman and Goodwin on Church Street in New Haven. And I am pleased to be presenting these applications to you this evening. With me here on the call and who you will hear from are Tony Nazardo, a representative of the applicant and owner, Lamp Realty LLC, Ryan McAvoy, who you saw earlier, and I know you all know well, our civil engineer with Mylon McBroom, John Pruitt, our architect, and Dave Sullivan, our traffic engineer with Mylon McBroom. We're bringing these applications forward in an effort to work with this commission to implement the vision that you established in your affordable housing regulation a year ago to create more housing in the town of Cheshire, affordable to moderate income households, and make a positive enhancement to the housing stock in Cheshire. And we believe our Lakeside of Cheshire proposal at 50 Hazel Drive will do exactly that. First thing I'd like to do, Mr. Chairman, is turn over to Tony Nazardo to introduce himself to the commission, give you the perspective of the owner and developer and his vision for the development, and then I'll come back and do more of an overview on the application.
Okay, great, thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Commissioner and commission members. My name is Anthony Nazardo. I'm a member of Lamp Realty LLC of Stratford, Connecticut. Lamp Realty is a family business consisting of 4 brothers in the electrical business, Louis, Anthony, Michael, and Phil. It's affiliated with NNS Electric of Stratford. NNS has been around for 53 years and is now in the process of being turned over to the 3rd generation of Nazardos. Back in 1978, the Nazardo brothers built their first construction project, a duplex in the south end of Stratford. From there, we eventually built small subdivisions, commercial buildings, townhouses, and apartment-type construction. We built over 700 residential units to date, ranging from the 1978 duplex, which sold for $55,000 a side, to multi-million-dollar custom homes. Most of our projects were built by us. We bought the land at 50 Hazel Drive about 13 years ago. It was our intention to construct 44 apartment-type units in one building and sell them as condominiums. We received all approvals and started demolition of the center portion of the nursing home, retaining the 2 wings for reuse and renovation as required by our zoning approvals. And as many of you remember, in 2007, that market disappeared. We held on to the land, and last year, Cheshire Zoning made a decision, which I feel was a very, very forward-thinking decision. They decided to adopt a new affordable housing regulation rather than rely on the onerous state statutes. The new regulations was presented by Attorney Fazone for the Cheshire Housing Authority. We then sought the services of Mylon McBroom to design the site, John Pruitt, architect, to design the building, and Joe Williams, our land use attorney. We then proceeded to design the project in complete compliance with the new regulations. This team, I believe, came up with a well-conceived, well-designed, and attractive project, and a product sorely needed in Cheshire. I have a similar project in Stratford, Connecticut, 10 to 15 minutes from Bridgeport Hospital, and I believe the renter mix will be similar. In that project, we have a town EMT, multiple doctors and residents at Bridgeport Hospital, nurses, young professionals, and empty nesters, all the way to an elderly husband and wife, the wife in her late 80s, and the husband in his early 90s. Their children wanted them in a controlled, safe, wheelchair-accessible environment, which this type of product provides. The rent at Lakeside of Cheshire will range approximately from $1,200 to $2,400 per month, depending on the number of bedrooms and the location within the building. The property is conveniently located near the I-84 interchange and Route 70, Waterbury Road, with shopping and restaurants nearby. I think this project will be a great asset to Cheshire, not to mention the substantial contribution to the tax base of Cheshire. This is housing that is sorely needed in Cheshire, but also in Connecticut generally. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, back to me. I just want to give a couple of historical points to bring you up to current. So, you know, what we've been doing with the proposal and a little bit more about the site. Beginning about 1972, possibly even a little bit earlier, a nursing home called the Lakeview Convalescent Home was built and operated on the site of 50 Hazel Drive. Historical records show that the home had up to 210 residents, plus a fairly large staff. The home was operated in 2 concrete block buildings with an X-type connector between them. That site layout actually had a longer building face and greater building coverage than what we are proposing to you here this evening. The home was closed and vacated at some point before 2005. As Tony mentioned, in 2005, that's when this commission gave approval to the 3 applications, which I believe you have on record for this application, and that was for the age-restricted units under the SARD regulation. The Wetlands Commission approved a wetlands permit for that development as well. Note that that proposal included an increase in building coverage, in lot coverage, and construction closer to the pond and to the wetlands than we are proposing this evening, and it included construction of a landing and a dock all the way down to the pond. As Tony mentioned, after the market died, so did that project. So fast forward to, as he mentioned, in the fall of 2018, the idea of going forward on a multifamily housing proposal on this site moved ahead. And I brought John Milone with me to meet with Bill Volker. We asked Bill, can we work together to do something under the town's regulations and maybe not need Section 8-30G on the application? Bill informed me that the Plan of Conservation and Development had recommended actually revising the town's affordable housing regulation, and that the Cheshire Housing Authority was working on an application. So we spoke with the Housing Authorities Council, saw what they were looking to do, offered some comments, waited to see what you all would do. And in May 2019, we, as Tony mentioned, we were pleased to see that the commission adopted an amendment to Section 44A. We followed through on a goal that you set in the POCD to add affordable housing stock, encourage collaboration with the private sector, and offer an alternative to Section 830G. And we believe you should be commended for that. We saw the regulation that you adopted, and we decided that we could work within it, and therefore began the site work to bring forward an application under this regulation. When the plan was completed, we began discussions with town staff earlier this year to obtain their feedback. On April 23rd of this year, the Water Pollution Control Authority granted us preliminary approval for septic system capacity. The Inland Wetlands Commission approved a wetlands permit for this development on July 7th. I believe you have that approval in your record. It was noted in that approval, by the way, that there were no hits on the natural diversity database for this site. Just to back up a little bit, we then, before filing those applications, we had a WebEx meeting with town staff on May 7th to present the plans, hear their feedback, and we incorporated that feedback into the plans before we filed the applications. On June 1st, 2020, we filed the zoning applications that are pending before you now. And on that same day, I mailed a letter to our neighbors in the immediate vicinity, inviting them to a community meeting via WebEx. And although, as you know, it's not required, we wanted to do that as a courtesy to get information out as soon as possible to folks about what we were proposing as soon as we filed it. We received multiple emails with questions and some calls from our neighbors, responded to all of those, and provided everyone a Dropbox link to all of the application materials so that nobody had to go into the town hall to see them as you would normally do if it was a normal time. Also wanted to note that we have, and I think you'll hear them later, Mr. Chairman, we have read all of the comments that have been submitted to the commission from members of the public, and our team will be addressing them as we go through our presentations to the extent they're not already addressed in the materials that we have submitted to you previously. And last thing to bring us current before we get to the applications themselves, and we'll talk about it more a little bit later, is if these zoning applications are approved, we will be making application next to the State Office of Traffic Administration and DOT for straight traffic approval. Now to the zoning applications, just to discuss a few of the highlights and the applicable standards. We have applications now before you for zone change to affordable housing district and for a special permit to allow the development. Section 44A of your regulation that you adopted a year ago governs both of those applications, and both of the applications comply with Section 44A. First, on the zone change, the site meets the qualifying standards under Section 44A3, where you set some rules for which properties and which areas of town could qualify for this type of development, and our site does. And I wanted to list a few reasons why we believe 50 Hazel Drive is a good location for multifamily housing. First, as I mentioned, for roughly 50 years, the property has been approved for multifamily housing and has been developed for it. Second, the site is served by public water and sewer. Third, apartment buildings actually adjoin the 50 Hazel Drive property on two sides, to the south, which is to the left of the plan that you can see on the screen, and to the west immediately across Hazel Drive, so toward the top of the plan that you see on the screen. And those are both between our site and Waterbury Road. In fact, the only properties accessing Hazel Drive are in use for multifamily housing. Fourth, the property is in a transitional area. It's between a single family neighborhood, existing apartment properties, and commercial and other businesses, but it is also buffered to the north by a large undisturbed portion of the parcel, to the east by the pond that is on our site. And that undisturbed portion of the property connects to a huge tract of forested open space controlled by the town of Cheshire. Point number 5, the property is near an arterial road, Waterbury Road, near Interstate Highway 84, and near a commuter parking lot for I-84. And 6th, the property is within walking distance to the CT Transit bus line. Now this, as I mentioned, this commission designated the areas of town that are appropriate for multifamily affordable housing development in Section 44A.3.1, and that those parameters that you gave in your regulation include properties fronting on or within 500 feet of Waterbury Road. I want to note also that Section 44A.5 provides that the commission, in looking at a zone change application like this, shall consider the consistency with the plan of conservation and development. And as I think I mentioned at the outset, your POCD from 2016 recommended revising Section 44A and making it a more effective tool for creating affordable housing. And in the plan, it noted that 2/3 of community members who responded to the survey stated that they support moderately priced housing, exactly the type of thing that we are proposing. And I would note that this zone change achieves those goals and is therefore consistent with the plan of conservation and development. Now, under your regulation, the commission also must consider the supply of affordable housing and the need for affordable housing. And we've provided you a trove of data and analysis on this subject. We submitted a book that looks like this. Hopefully everybody has one of these that had a number of studies and reports with data, as well as a summary memo directing you to key information on this subject. And the documentation clearly shows that the need for affordable housing in Cheshire and in the region is substantial, and it is undeniable. That's true, actually, across the state of Connecticut and the rest of the nation as well. The need is especially true in the middle of the market for moderate income households who wish to rent as opposed to buy and are clearly underserved. We noted on page 2 of our memo that the profile done of the town of Cheshire by the Partnership for Strong Communities confirms that the middle of the market has great need. And in that profile, the partnership stated, Cheshire, like most of Connecticut's municipalities, has a relatively high median household income, high housing costs, few units for teachers, nurses, electricians, firefighters, and town workers, and a narrow range of choices for baby boomers seeking to downsize and millennials and young families seeking to move to town. In Cheshire, according to the state of Connecticut, the proportion of units that are affordable is 3.78% of the total dwelling units in town, and 22% of the renters in Cheshire have housing that's not affordable for them, which means they pay more than 30% of their income for their housing. So this zone change will enable the commission to show that it's prepared to implement the vision established in Section 44A with the first application that's come forward under the new regulation. And the community made clear that it would support more housing for residents of moderate incomes like police and firefighters and teachers. Those are some of the types of jobs that will qualify for affordable units in Lakeside of Cheshire. And we listed some of those on page 4 of that same memo that we gave you. And I note that Section 44A is focused on that middle segment of the market because you set the qualifying income as 80% of the area median income, whereas some other types of affordable housing may be focused on folks who are at 60% or 40% or even less of the area median income. And then there is some that goes up to 100 or 120%. This commission shows 80%, and that's an important segment of the community that's in great need for new and quality housing of this type. And our proposal meets that need and will help to mitigate it. And then last point on the zone change, the standard for approval that you put into Section 44A5 of the Affordable Housing District Regulation states that the commission shall approve the application, unless it finds that denial of the petition is required to protect substantial public interests in health, safety, or other matters which the commission may legally consider. Such substantial public interests clearly outweigh the need for affordable housing, and such substantial public interests cannot be otherwise protected by reasonable changes to the petition. By this standard, and based on everything that we have submitted to you and will present to you this evening, we respectfully submit that our zone change petition is eligible for and should be granted. Now, next to the special permit application, before we go to the other members of the team, and our team members will go over the property and details of our site and building design, and I don't want to duplicate those or steal their thunder. So just a few highlights from my perspective. You will note, as we believe, that the plan fully complies with the standards in Section 44A. We note that the size of the site, it's 22 acres, would permit 147 units under Section 44A. And so with proposing 114 units, we are proposing about 22% fewer units than would be permissible under the regulation. And Ryan McAvoy will explain in some detail how we are proposing less building footprint and less building coverage than the 2005 approval, even less than the convalescent home buildings. Our plan asks you to permit us to defer or to delay construction of 45 parking spaces, and that's permitted under the regulations, and our plan complies with the regulations because it shows you where we could build those 45 parking spaces. We've given you the information, and Dave Sullivan will explain why we believe, and the data shows that two parking spaces per unit is excessive and unnecessary. And so it's just better environmentally for us not to have to put in that paving. Otherwise, we hope you'll find that the site design is thoughtful, it's sensitive to site constraints. It will bring an environmental benefit by improving the quality of stormwater discharge to the pond on the property. And it will revitalize and upgrade the site in a very attractive way. It also maintains, our plan does, a substantial area of the site undisturbed, protects the wetlands in the pond, and the Wetlands Commission unanimously approved our wetlands permit. As you saw from the engineering department email, we have addressed all of their comments, and we believe the comments that you heard from the fire and police departments can pretty easily be addressed. Now, regarding the apartment units themselves, as Bill Volker noted in his memo, 18 of the 114 units are 2-bedroom units, and the rest are split evenly between studio and 1-bedroom apartments. The development under your regulation is a quote-unquote set-aside affordable housing development in which 25% of the units, or 29 of them, will have their rent capped in compliance with the AHD regulation. And tab 8 of our original application package, if you have it, it looks like this. At tab 8, we gave you an affordability plan that describes in detail how the affordable units will be rented. So you have all the terms and the rules for that. And Bill is correct that we will have moderate rents in those units based on 80% of the area median income. And they will be available for people earning up to $54,000 a year for the studio and 1-bedroom units, or up to $65,000 a year for the 2-bedroom units. And so based on the current median income, the rents for those units should be $1,200 and $1,500 per month. Now, we believe it's important to note that a lot of the focus is on the affordable units, and that, of course, is the name and the goal of your regulation, but that's only 25% of the units. So Lakeside of Cheshire will primarily be market rate housing because 75% of the units, or 85 out of the 114 units, will be rented on the open market at market rates. And the development is designed to be as attractive as possible to the general rental market and to be maintained that way. No one will know by looking at Lakeside of Cheshire that some of the units are price restricted or which units they are. Our architect, John Cruitt, will walk you through the building layouts and the architectural design, which provides a craftsman style of design. And you'll hear about how John made several decisions on exterior building finishes to add interest and uniqueness to the building facades. Dave Sullivan will be our last presenter. Dave is the head of traffic from Mylona McBroom. He will review their traffic study. And we've received a number of comments and questions on this issue, including from Commissioner Natali, and we appreciate you submitting those for us in advance, and from the public. Dave's prepared to address all the major topics with data and his experience. He also, Dave submitted a detailed letter in reply to some of those topics on Friday, so you have that. We have heard and we understand the concerns that folks have raised about Waterbury Road and accessing it from roads in the neighborhood. Dave will discuss that topic, and he will go over the available information. He will explain how the intersection of Hazel Drive with Waterbury Road has good levels of service and will maintain good levels with our development. We will not be changing them. But keep in mind, please, that a major player is not in the room, and that's the Connecticut Department of Transportation. Waterbury Road is a state highway. The DOT owns and controls it, and the DOT designed it and built it as it currently stands. By state statute, the DOT has sole jurisdiction over state highways and the immediate approaches to them. We will need approval from OSTA for this development. As I mentioned, that's the Office of State Traffic Administration, part of DOT. If we receive your approval of these applications, we will apply right away to DOT, but we can't do it before we receive local approval. And then we will have the discussion with DOT. And we will, of course, include the Cheshire Police Department as the local traffic authority for Cheshire. And all of the issues that have been submitted to the commission or maybe raised in this hearing will go before DOT. And if DOT wants to change something, it has the power and the authority to make it happen. So I just wanted to point out up front that this proceeding is by no means the final word on that subject. Dave will also go over the data that he has submitted to you, showing why the deferral of 45 parking spaces makes sense, and that even with that deferred amount, we are still building more than enough parking. And that'll be, I think, the end of his presentation, and that's the end of mine. So just in conclusion, after you review all the information that we have submitted and the testimony, we're confident you will find that the plan complies with the regulations and per the standard in section 44A7, that the special permit application should be approved as well. That's my overview. I appreciate your patience for all of that. And I'd like to turn it over now to Ryan McAvoy to go over the site and engineering details.
Thank you, Attorney Williams. Can everybody hear me?
I had a question for Attorney Williams.
Sure.
Sorry, Mr. Strollo, go ahead.
Attorney Williams, on the figure for affordable housing and the figure of $54,000, is that a two-person income in a one-bedroom, or is that a one-person income?
It's the maximum income for a family of 4 for that. Well,
a one-bedroom unit.
It's actually, I'm sorry. A one-bedroom unit assumes, this is per HUD statistics, it assumes 1.5 persons per bedroom. I was mixing that up with something else. So the 54,000 could be 2 people, it could be 1 person.
Okay.
But it's total for the unit.
You're figuring that 54,000 on the Cheshire's median income minus 80%? Is that what it is? 80% of the median income?
That's one of the parts of the calculation. I'll point you to it.
The rent per month seems, I mean, that's your business as far as knowing, but I just, when I think affordable housing, $2,400 a month is not affordable to most people, That's when yes. I think that's, that's when we went for all this and discussed this and went forward with this, my understanding was that, it was going to be affordable to, a family, a working family that, and I think that like 2,400 kind of just prices them right out. So I don't know if it's even doing what I thought it would do on this kind of project. I mean,
right. I think he stated 1,200 and 1,500. I'm not 100%.
I did, yeah.
1,200.
I didn't hear 2,400.
1,200 and 1,500 is what he stated in his opening remarks.
Okay. I thought that the applicant said 2,400 for a 2-bedroom.
No, I'm sorry if the sound quality wasn't great on that. Let me walk you through real quick how it works. And then if you want to look at it during the hearing or later, pages 4 and 5 of the affordability plan we gave you, Commissioner Strollo, which is at tab 8 of the application package that we gave you. That gives you the exact calculation number by number. So you start with the lower of the area median income for New Haven, Meriden, or the statewide median, and the lower one there is for the New Haven area, which is 91,000. That's for a family of 4. That's what I was thinking of before. So you start with that, then you apply an adjustment that HUD uses based on the number of people, and they assume 1.5 people per bedroom. So you actually reduce the income by 75% because of that. Then you apply the 80%. And when you apply that 80% at that step 3,
54.
That's when you're at 54,000. And then you take 30% because of the income, because that's an affordable level.
Yep.
Then you divide it by 12, and that's the maximum monthly rent. And then you also compare it with what the HUD fair market rents are for the area. And then you determine reasonable monthly expenses for heat and utilities, and you subtract that. We used $125. And that's how we got down to the exact number we show is $1,243 per month for a studio or for a 1-bedroom. You do the same type of calculation for a 2-bedroom. It's just you're assuming 3 people in the unit as opposed to 1.5 people in the unit. And that's how you get down to $1,492 per month. And it'll be based on what a reasonable utility allowance is at the time, and based on what the area median income is at the time that the development opens.
It's not based on what the person makes. So would it be?
That tells you what the maximum rent they can pay and the maximum income they can have to qualify for one of these units. And then the plan tells you all of the information that has to be submitted by the person who would like to rent one of these units to prove that they do not make more than that amount.
Yeah, I'm just, like I said, to me, if you were making $40,000, you couldn't afford to live there.
Well, perhaps not. Perhaps not.
That's kind of, affordable on that end. That's like I said, that's what I assume that this was for, and it just doesn't make sense to me now.
Well, that's why I made a point of describing that the commission chose a factor of 80%. That's at the middle range of affordable housing that's needed. It's not at the very low range where somebody maybe making 30 or 40,000 might qualify. You might need to be closer to the 54 or closer to the 65 to be able to afford it. And it really is an individual case-by-case decision that the administrator needs to look at, what you have and how you could afford it. But it appears that in your regulation, you chose to hit that point, and it conforms with what the community survey that is cited in the plan says, which is we want people of moderate income who might be a firefighter, a teacher, a police officer, or what have you, to be able to afford it. And that's still an important segment of need for affordable housing in the market. And we've listed a bunch of those occupations that would hit about those income points in our memo on page 4.
And as far as the senior, is there going to be a fixed price for somebody that's over 65, or that you didn't touch on that?
No, there's no focus or changes in any way based on age. There's not an age restriction in that's being proposed.
I know that when the last application, they had a certain amount of age restriction on this property.
Right.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Kurtz, can I just ask one question while we're on this topic? I realize we're going to move off it. Just for the record, since we're talking about people qualifying, Mr. Williams. So if a person gets an increase in salary, their income increases, then are they asked to vacate the premises at a certain point?
I think we have a provision about that in the plan. Usually they will be, if there is a unit available, they would be offered an opportunity to move into a market rate unit. Or if it makes sense, to keep that unit declared a market rate, and if another unit is available and you can make it affordable and still kind of meet the even distribution of the units, then that can be done as well. But either way, they would either need to pay market rent or find another place to live.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, any other questions from anybody? No, let's continue with the presentation.
Okay, Ryan.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Am I audible to everybody? I'd just like to confirm that before I start talking.
Yes.
Thank you. For the record, my name is Ryan McAvoy. I'm a licensed professional with Mylona McBroom. I don't know who's controlling the screen, but if it's Suzanne, if you could be kind enough to go to sheet 2 of our set of plans.
It's Bill that is controlling the screen, and
Bill.
he will be back in front of the computer momentarily.
Okay, well, I'll just proceed.
Thanks.
So our property, some of what I'm going to state for the presentation was clarified by Attorney Williams. So forgive me if there is a overlap in data. But our property is located, the subject property application is located on the east side of Hazel Drive, on the north end of Larson and Lakeside Avenue, with Larson's Pond being the defining physical feature and the south central portion of the site. It is rather irregular in shape, and the property is bisected and very neatly defined by a stream corridor that discharges into Larson's Pond from north to south. So the majority, well, essentially all of our presentation is going to be focused on the westernmost portion of the site between the wetland corridor and the pond and Hazel Drive. So the screen shot in front of you represents our proposed conditions. Hazel Drive being on the west or on the upper left sheet on this set, on the side on the sheet, the pond being at the bottom of the sheet or to the east, north being generally to the right. Historically and currently, the site has been occupied by what was a convalescent home. The convalescent home was partially demolished in the recent past and was most recently in operation, my understanding, around 2003. The building that was there, that has been partially demolished, occupied approximately 36,600 square feet in the southernmost portion of this part of the site. It housed up to a couple hundred patients and staff, and had entrance driveways coming off of Hazel Drive at the southernmost end of the site, in fact, encroaching on the neighboring property, and a secondary driveway further up Hazel Drive to the north. The remaining part of the western portion of the site, or the developed portion of the site that we're proposing, consisted of parking and a large portion for a historic underground subsurface sewage disposal system. On the eastern part of the site, which we're not proposing in development, which represents over 2/3 of the property, there were some underground utilities, subsurface sewage disposal systems that were taken offline when the site was hooked up to the sanitary sewer in 1993. The eastern part of the site, again, where we're not developing, is contiguous with large portions of open space areas known as the Dime Savings Parcel in Cheshire, and is also contiguous with large tracts of relatively undeveloped land. The areas in closer proximity to our site, particularly Hazel Drive, have multifamily housing presently on the west side of Hazel and on the southeast side of Hazel coming off of Waterbury Road. Further up Hazel Drive, you transition to single-family residential houses in the neighborhood to the west of the site. And on the opposite side of the pond, from Larson's Pond, again, we have single-family residential housing on Lakeside Avenue and Larson's Avenue. In terms of topography, we have a fairly well-defined topographic condition on the property with some areas of steep slopes, some areas of moderate slopes, and areas where it's relatively flat for development purposes. And the grades range from 580 on the westernmost part of the site down to the pond, which is roughly at elevation 520. So there's about a 60-foot grade change from east to west. The existing building, or the historic building, was roughly at an elevation of 526 at the lowest level, so not terribly above the pond elevation, and had multi-tiered levels with the grade on the front side roughly at 535 to 540, or just below the road elevation. The site historically had very little formal stormwater management. The runoff from the building, from the parking areas, essentially drained directly to the wetlands in the pond, untreated and undetained. There is also a small drainage system that collects runoff from Hazel Drive itself, from the town road, and discharges at a point discharge on the site above the wetlands. And there is an easement in favor of the town for the purposes of that particular stormwater discharge. In terms of utilities, available utilities, there is public water in Hazel Drive. We do have a letter from the Regional Water Authority confirming that they can serve the site. And as Attorney Williams mentioned, the Cheshire WPCA has provided feasibility approval for the application in front of you. I'd like to transition to our proposed conditions of the property, which is represented by the plan that you see in front of you. And what we are showing on this plan are 2 new residential buildings. Each will contain 57 residential dwelling units comprised of primarily studio and single bedroom apartments, and to a much lesser extent, approximately 20% of the unit count or unit matrix will have 2-bedroom units. The first building on the south, or on the left on the sheet that you are seeing in front of you, is roughly in the same location of the historical convalescent home. It is much smaller in size, but it is in essentially the same location. We are increasing the distance from the pond or the wetlands to the building from what today is only 39 feet to just approximately 100 feet. And we are also enhancing the vegetative buffer to the wetlands, which has been approved by the Wetlands Commission. The second building, or the northerly of the two, on the right side of your sheet, is located in the area that used to be, or the historic location of a leaching field. This building location is chosen in part to provide the most available vegetative buffer to residential properties to the west or to the top of the sheet, while allowing for relatively straightforward grading down from the building to the wetlands and stormwater management areas. So essentially, we're trying to provide the most benefit to neighboring properties in terms of the building location, in terms of grading, with while also respecting the wetlands and minimizing the need for significant retaining walls. We are looking to relocate the two driveways on site. And the two driveways on the site currently, as I mentioned earlier, are at least in part located off the property. So we will be relocating these driveways to a location on Hazel Drive that will, first of all, eliminate any historical encroachments on adjacent properties. Second is to maximize the available site distance from the driveway locations, which will be discussed in a little more detail by Dave Sullivan later in our presentation. And lastly, to have the driveways enter into the site at a grade that allows for what we would determine or what we would deem to be reasonable grades approaching both the buildings and approaching the roadway under 10% in grade, which is certainly a reasonable grade for a driveway. It's below your maximum allowable grade for residential properties, for town roads, et cetera. In addition to the buildings and driveways, of course, we're providing parking for the two buildings. Per the Affordable Housing Regulation and Section 33 of your zoning regulations, we are required to provide 2 parking spaces per dwelling unit. And we show on our plan, on sheet GU, which is not this particular plan, but how we could develop the entirety of those 228 parking spaces. Thank you. So the upper right portion of that shows where the deferred parking spaces are proposed and how they would be constructed if, in fact, the commission, the applicant, or town staff determines that ultimately those parking spaces are required. We are proposing, as part of this, 183 parking spaces, which represents a ratio of approximately 1.6 spaces per dwelling unit. And again, as I mentioned earlier, our unit matrix is very much heavily weighted towards studio and 1-bedroom apartment units. So as you'll see later in our presentation, Dave Sullivan is going to provide some of the backup data that suggests that a ratio of 1.6 spaces per unit greatly exceeds what we would expect to need on this site, and that the deferral of the 45 parking spaces shown in the upper right-hand corner of the sheet are a reasonable deferment at this time. In terms of the landscaping of the site, if you could go back, actually, the colored rendering, perhaps, Bill, might be best in this case. That's loaded on the website. I don't know if you can bring that up.
Well, I'm going to try to find it, Ryan, but
if you can't find it, that's
all I have color is the buildings, the elevations.
Bill, there's one, there's 3 of them listed in a row. There was the existing conditions and the landscaping.
Yeah.
And the
I'm
grading.
sure I have it. Yeah, okay, but I'm not sure I have it ready to post up, so.
Okay, well, you can just, if you could just go to the landscaping sheet, sheet 4 in the set. One more down. Yes. One more down.
Right there. One more down, hold on.
No, one more down.
That
Okay.
one. LS?
Yep. So as part of our landscaping plan, we propose, obviously, first and foremost is to provide shade trees in the parking areas in accordance with the zoning regulations, which we do provide. We are also providing enhanced vegetation along the lawn area that's between our parking area and Larson's Pond to the southeast or on the lower left on this particular sheet. We're providing screening vegetation in the form of shade trees and evergreen trees along Hazel Drive between the building nearest to the site and Hazel Drive. And we also have a outdoor patio seating area to the northernmost portion of the site or to the right of the property as it shows on this sheet, with linkages via stone dust path along the wetland edge or along the stormwater basins where there's pedestrian access through those areas to the outdoor seating area. And lastly, I did want to point out that we do provide a very wide pedestrian friendly linkage between the two buildings. We have a substantial area of landscaping and site amenities between the buildings, between the parking bays, roughly center to the site. What are you trying to bring up, Bill?
He just emailed, it's not gonna work, so.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
We do feel that our landscaping plan provides enhancement to visual buffers between the pond and the building, between the road and the buildings, substantial site amenities for along parking areas and between the buildings, and outdoor patio seating area for residents in the building. I want to turn my attention to the stormwater management. So Bill, if you could go to next sheet, please. Thank you. So as I mentioned, the site currently has very little in the way of formal stormwater management systems other than capturing town road drainage and directing it through the property. So runoff comes off of paved surfaces and essentially overland flows right into the pond. What we propose with this particular development is a standard piping catch basin collection system within the parking lot, capturing runoff from buildings, runoff from driveways, runoff from parking areas, and directing them to one of two stormwater management areas within the site. These stormwater management areas, or basins as we call them, are designed to provide attenuation of peak flows of runoff from the property so that we are not increasing the rate of runoff from the property for the 10, 25, 50, and 100-year storms. But I'd say more importantly on this property is that they provide enhanced water quality features that do not exist today. Each basin, prior to the stormwater entering the basin, we have a pre-treatment proprietary oil and grit separator unit called a CDS unit rather. And that is designed in accordance with DOT standards for removal of 80% of total suspended solids. After leaving the proprietary unit, it will enter into sediment forebay in both basins where, again, there's further attenuation of any solids or any sediment that does not get captured by the oil grit separator. And also in the remainder of the basins, we provide for water quality volume below the outlet elevation of the basin. This water quality volume will provide for up to and exceeding 1 inch of volume of runoff where any oils, sediment, pollutants that are captured within the drainage system are retained within the basin and treated by the vegetation that we've proposed, and will greatly enhance the water quality of leaving the site from what happens today. We are also continuing to collect the runoff from Hazel Drive and directing that in a separate discharge out towards the wetland system. Now, the discharge from our two basins and from the town road drainage system will be directed to a level spreader outlet. And what this is a series of concrete leaching galleries, essentially, with the top openings exposed to grade, which will allow the flow exiting from our stormwater management system to be spread out over a substantially long flow path to reduce velocities and reduce the erosive nature that could occur if you have a point discharge similar to the point discharge that exists today from the town road drainage system. So in summary, we feel that in addition to meeting the requirements of your zoning regulations, and in addition to meeting the goals and standards of the 2004 DEP Water Quality Manual, that we're going to be providing a substantial increase and the amount of water quality and decrease in the amount of pollutants leaving the site from perhaps what has existed historically. Lastly, in terms of the sediment erosion control plan, we designed in accordance with the 2002 guideline for erosion and sediment control by the DEP. That plan consists of providing for temporary sediment traps during construction, diversion of overland flow from construction areas to those sediment traps, protection of downgrading areas with silt fence hay bales, vehicular access being limited to construction entrance pads, and also a detailed construction sequence associated with how the site should be developed. So again, with the sediment erosion control, we feel we are in compliance with the state guidelines and also town regulations. We did receive comments from the fire department, and I intend on reviewing the site-related elements with Deputy Marshal Kozlowski. Although a quick glance, it doesn't appear that there's anything that he's suggesting that is something that we can't provide in the site. As I mentioned, we did also receive wetlands approval, WPCA approval. The engineering department has no outstanding comments. And with that, I'd like to hand it back to Attorney Williams, or if there's any questions from the commission about the site plan, happy to answer them.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I have a couple questions.
Sure, Mr. Vitale.
Yep. So bear with me, sorry. I saw the comments regarding and heard your comments regarding the crosswalk going across Hazel to the existing sidewalk.
Yes.
In our regulations in 44A87, it states the concrete sidewalk shall be provided adjacent to all streets and roadways. I don't see on your plans anywhere for the plans to put a sidewalk in front of the property on Hazel. Also, it states that the concrete sidewalk shall connect buildings, bus stops, parking areas, and recreation areas. So my thought around that is when I'm looking at these buildings, I also don't see sidewalks or any indications of other crosswalks leading to where you're saying kids would cross the street at a, if town put in a crosswalk to go across to that sidewalk. So how will children safely navigate? Were they going to go through the parking lot? Are you planning on additional sidewalks and crosswalks? And what are you going to do about that sidewalk in front of it that's required?
Well, in terms of the zoning regulations and in terms of our site plan, we do provide sidewalks on the sides and front, rear, and sides of both buildings. And as I mentioned, there's a pedestrian linkage between the two buildings, in between the larger parking bays in the center of the site. We do have sidewalks along Hazel Drive on the opposite side. In our response to your comments, we suggested that it may be appropriate to place a crosswalk across Hazel Drive to get to that existing sidewalk. And that's something we're prepared to do and work with your legal traffic authority to have implemented. But there's no particular need to put sidewalks along Hazel Drive. I believe the spirit of the regulation is to provide linkages and sidewalks internally on the site, as opposed
to. I'm not still to chime in this one because I understand what you're saying about the spirit of the regulation. I'm going with the letter of the regulation that says you got to put a sidewalk in.
Yeah, and
Mr. Chairman, section 44A8-7D, Jeff, is that you're referring to?
Yeah. 47.
Yeah, we're not allowed to make him put sidewalks on Hazel Drive. We can require him to put sidewalks along any driveways, any private improvements on his property, but we're not allowed, same way we're not allowed anymore to put in the subdivision regulations to require developers to put sidewalks on town roads. So we can't make him the regulations cannot require him to put sidewalks along the frontage of Hazel Drive in the town road.
Because this is not a new road, it's an existing town road?
Correct.
So Ryan,
to all streets and roadways, adjacent means to all streets and roadways, to the extent that those are private, we can ask him to do that. And to the extent that they make sense to bring them out to any public areas, we can do that on their property. We cannot require him to put sidewalks along the Hazel Drive right away. Can't do it.
Okay, so Ryan, you indicated as it shows on the map then, around the drawing that we're looking at, the sidewalk going around the back, which is the building. So I'll go back to my question. How are children going to get to the buildings to Hazel Drive to get to the proposed crosswalk?
I'm having a little trouble hearing the audio. I think I picked up the gist of your question, Commissioner Talley, but you were breaking up quite a bit. So If I missed something, please forgive me. But as I mentioned, we do have sidewalks around the entirety of the northerly and southerly buildings with a direct linkage across from north to south, from building to building, sidewalks across the front of the southerly building, and then the ability for pedestrians to cross Hazel Drive, preferably at a crosswalk within the right of way out to the existing sidewalk.
I'm
So
sorry,
there are
forgive me.
sidewalks. There are sidewalks throughout our site, adjacent to parking areas, adjacent to buildings, where there is adequate ability to traverse the property to get to Hazel Drive.
Gotcha. I'm sorry if you couldn't hear me. Can you hear me okay now?
Yes, it's better now. Yes.
Okay, so how are the children going to get from the buildings to the crosswalk at Hazel Drive? There's no sidewalk going that I see anywhere.
Well, we have sidewalks, like I said, along the front of each building, linkages between the buildings. And I suppose we can add a crosswalk across the frontage of the southerly building to get out to Hazel Drive. But our building and parking areas are 20 feet away from 20 feet away from Hazel Drive right away. So we can extend the sidewalk out to Hazel to a crosswalk to get across the street.
Gotcha. I'm just looking at the safety, looking at the drawing, coming from one of these buildings. I mean, it looks like kids are going to have to walk through the parking lot to, get to the sidewalk to get to a bus.
They'll have to walk across some internal site driveways, but they won't have to walk through the parking lot.
Gotcha.
It may take it under advisement that perhaps a crosswalk or two within the site would be appropriate, particularly in front of the southerly building out to Hazel Drive. I think that's something that we can certainly incorporate into the plan.
Okay. And the second question, under the site portion of this. So 2 questions. How big are the parking spaces going to be?
9 by 18 standard.
Okay, so they're going to conform. Okay. So one comment I want to make. Last year, when we looked at the affordable housing regulations, there were a lot of arguments back and forth regarding the number of parking spots required. Realizing that we have some developments in town, some condos in town, where parking spots could have been deferred or they just didn't have enough because at the time those were approved, it was thought that 1 car per unit or 1.5 cars per unit. We put the 2 in place to make sure that didn't happen. I know from reading the documentation that you provided that you say there's not going to be parking allowed on the roadways. I'm not sure how that's enforced because I don't think the Cheshire Police are going to go in there and say, okay, somebody's parked on a roadway, we're going to tow you if you don't move your car. But I want to say that I'm strenuously in favor of the regulations that we passed last year with 2 parking spaces per. You a couple minutes ago indicated that for the units for a 1-bedroom, the state estimates go off 1.5 occupants per bedroom. So if you're talking about a 3-bedroom or a 2-bedroom unit, which is the max, that's minimum of 3 people there. I just would really, I'm going to say I really want the 2 parking spaces per unit. We had this argument. We had a lot of discussions on it last year, and when it passed unanimously for the 2 parking spaces.
Well, I think there's a distinction, perhaps I would argue, between what is required by zoning in terms of the parking spaces provided and the discretion that's afforded to you for deferred parking spaces. Now, deferred parking spaces, we're not suggesting that they would never be built. We're suggesting that in general, and based on data, based on the unit matrix that we have of primarily studios and 1-bedroom apartments, that a ratio of 1.6 per unit would be more than adequate for what we need in the site. Should that not be the case 5, 10, 15 years down the road, and there is an issue with parking, those spaces could be built in a fairly straightforward manner. But what we're trying to do is limit what I would suggest, and based on the data that we have, that unnecessary parking spaces or parking spaces that we don't believe are necessary to support the development in a reasonable way. But we're not suggesting that we don't have to necessarily do them if there were an issue. It's the whole purpose of the deferred parking spaces to show how it could be built, which I believe we've done, but demonstrate that perhaps they're not necessary at this time.
Again, I think we'll agree to disagree on that one. Again, when we passed the regulations recently, so it was last year, it passed unanimously that we were looking for that because of the conditions and other developments in town.
Understood. And that's why again, we're showing 228 and how it could be built. We're offering the opportunity to provide something that perhaps is less impervious and a little bit more vegetation and landscaping than what would be the case if we just had, all the parking spaces needed.
I know that you talked about the state too coming in for the approval. Are there different levels of approval? Do they look and say, okay, if their approval process is different if you have 228 spaces versus the 183 that are proposed?
Well,
No, it's no different. They meet the threshold. They're asking for deferral on the parking, but because the minimum requirement is 2 per unit, they meet the threshold. They have to go to the state. Doesn't change anything state.
So for the state, it doesn't matter if it's 183 or 228.
It's still the same threshold. Yeah.
The threshold we're actually dealing with in this particular case is the actual number of residential units. So if you exceed 100 residential units, you have to go to the state traffic authority through that process.
But
So regardless of,
when you go for that state approval, are they going to say, do you have 150 parking spots, or do you have 200, or do you have 300?
I'm going to defer to Dave Sullivan on that because he's much more familiar with the coordination and the application process through the state traffic authority.
Yeah, I'd be happy to answer that now, or if you want to defer that question until I get back into the parking. Short answer.
Yeah, Dave, that's up to you. As long as we get an answer, I don't care. I don't mind if you defer it.
Yeah, well, the short answer is one of the inputs is the parking that's been approved by the local planning and zoning commissions. And Bill actually would be vouching for whatever we put on that application, which would be the 228, I believe, would be the approved number of parking. And that would go on the application to them.
Done for now. Sorry.
I have a couple of questions.
Were you all?
Yeah, I'm just happy to answer questions.
Yeah, anybody else?
Yes, I do.
Or Mr. Mercado.
2 questions, really. Ryan, based on the parking, on that middle section of parking, where you would add the additional, that's like a 12 to 14 foot drop there. Is that something you're going to grade now in case you need that parking later? Or is that something you'd have to bring in fill and take care of that at a later time if needed?
There'd have to be a retaining wall built and fill brought in.
But are you looking at doing that now or at the time if it's needed?
We're looking to do that at the time if it's needed.
And then the second question is the last application, I guess it was stated that they were looking at having a dock go out into the pond. Is that same intention here? Is there going to be access to the water, or are you guys pretty much blocking that off?
Just limited passive access through a trail along the edge. We're not looking to build anything out into the pond, and there was no such approval granted for anything like that in the Wetlands Commission approval. So we're looking to be much more passive with this than perhaps the more active dock scenario.
How is the edge of that waterway there to your property? Can people go down there easily and walk? Is there a little beach there?
It's about a 4-foot vertical drop from the existing edge of parking to the pond, and it's quite close, maybe 10 feet horizontally away. So it's not that conducive to actually physically walk up to the pond, just because of the existing slope between, essentially along the edge of the pond, particularly near a southerly building. So it's not something that we're looking to construct anything formal in that area right now.
Thank you.
Any other commission members have any questions for Mr.
One question, Mr. Kurtz, very briefly. Lieutenant Scott, did I read the application correctly that, in fact, the footprint of this project is smaller than that of the convalescent home?
Yes, Commissioner Tisco, that's correct. The square footage of the building that historically existed on the site was about approximately 36,000 square feet. And the total square footage of our 2 buildings combined is just under 30,000 square feet. So it's actually a slight reduction in the footprint of the building area on the site.
And if we added the parking lots that you will be putting in now in the parking lot for the convalescent home, is the area disturbed still smaller than the convalescent home, or might it be larger with the parking lots?
Well, the overall impervious surface, we're increasing slightly because of the size of the parking proposed. And our stormwater management design incorporates or considers that condition with the size and location of the basins to capture runoff from the parking areas and treat it accordingly so that we're not increasing any runoff. So the square footage of the building, total square footage of the building area will go down. The total impervious surface area will slightly go up, and we're mitigating that with the stormwater management basins.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, could I ask a question now?
Of course, Mr. Linder.
We talked about the square footage of the buildings compared between the new building and the convalescent home. Could you also compare, if you can, the height of the buildings compared to the convalescent home?
I believe, and I don't have the exact measurements on the building that's there today. I believe the building is 2 stories in the front, or at least the wings that are still there today are 2 stories in the front and 3 stories in the back. We're proposing a building that will be 4 stories in the back and 3 stories in the front. So I believe we're going to be higher with our proposed buildings than what is there today. I'm not sure exactly how much, Gil. I apologize. I don't have that exact information, but we're going to be roughly a story higher.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I thought it might be interesting to the public or for the people who live in that area just to generally understand how much bigger, but it looks like it's going to be approximately 1 story.
I'd say in that range, again, without having the benefit of knowing the exact height of the structure that's there today. Yeah. I know we're going up an additional story from what they had.
Okay, all right.
But that also has a different roof line that's a lot taller, right? The old building were flat roofed, and this is going to have.
This will have a pitched roof. So we could probably provide that information to you, but I just don't have it at my fingertips.
Yeah, so it's closer to 2 stories taller, I would assume.
It's possible. It's certainly 1 more story of living space, and then the peak of the roof, I couldn't say for certain what the relationship would be with the current building.
Just to comment off of that, do you have an architectural rendering of the building? I couldn't find one, but
we do, and that's actually the next portion of our presentation.
Oh, there you go.
I probably should have just deferred.
No problem.
It is, and I don't know if Bill will be able to bring that up, but if anybody wants to look at it, you do have that on the town website under the the heading for documents that are available for the virtual meetings. And if you go under Planning and Zoning Commission and under the 50 Hazel Drive heading, there's architectural plans in the list there. If you click on that, you will see the most up-to-date rendering that we have submitted.
We also got some in our package too, Mr. Salmon.
Good. Yep, that's it. Thank you, Bill. Any other questions for Ryan?
Oh, there it is. Oh, nice. Okay.
John Pruitt, the architect now.
All right, there we go.
Okay. Are we ready? Okay, can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. For the record, my name is John Pruitt. I am the owner and principal of John Pruitt Jr. AIA Architect. My firm is located in Guilford, Connecticut. We have in front of us a proposal to construct 2 identical buildings. Each building is 3 to 4 stories in height. The west facade, the facade that faces Hazel Drive, is 3 stories. The buildings are built into the site as was reviewed before, and the rear of the building, and there is a rear perspective, shows a 4-story elevation. Describing the building exterior materials, one of the things I wanted to do was go through a traditional approach in which I wanted to incorporate craftsman style elements. These elements include trim details, they include pitched roofs, and they include exterior materials. Among the exterior materials I'm proposing are straight edge random cut vinyl shingles, 7-inch exposure, clapboard, which is 6-inch exposure. We have also, which is somewhat relevant in craftsman style design, you have ashlar stone veneer, mostly at the base of the building and at the first story in the front. And we also have a vertical siding, which is barn board. So that describes pretty much what we're using for the exterior. To answer a question regarding the pitch of the building, I propose to pitch this building probably around 4 to 5 and 12, which means that it adds about 10.5 feet to the third story. I wanted to use a pitched roof approach because I wanted to give this more of a residential character. The front of the building features a predominant front entrance in which I chose to have a couple of exterior columns. They are structural in nature. They are deliberately designed to evoke a craftsman style character. The center portion of the building, you will notice, is ashlar stone and also vinyl solid panel siding. You'll notice also that the center portion of the building, it has an eave height that is about 4 feet higher than the balance of the building. And the major reason for this is because the building's 4 stories are accessible via elevator for each one of these buildings. The units themselves, the apartments, are all designed to comply with ANSI A117.1, the handicapped accessibility for dwelling units. They are type A units, which are directly focused to those who are wheelchair ridden and have details as such. And the balance of the units are type B units for less handicapped people, which would probably also have an appeal to market rate. The lower floor is a parking garage. There is also a lower level lobby, and off the lower level lobby, there is a fitness center. There is one fitness center for each one of these 2 buildings. As we go up the elevator to the upper floors, there is a large enough lobby that can serve as a day room that can contain furniture. So as we look at the rendering, we'll notice some indications of landscaping, pretty much that kind of is of the same feeling, although not the specific species of what is proposed on the site. There are foundation plantings, which are clearly shown on the landscape plan, and there are also shade trees. So that pretty much complements the exterior of the building. So, okay, I described the units as being totally accessible to and usable by disabled persons, especially the A units. By code, 10% of the units have to be A units. And this project fully complies with that. As far as construction, the building is constructed of materials that are approved by the state of Connecticut building code. It is predominantly wood construction, although the parking garage contains non-combustible materials such as round concrete columns and the foundation basement wall of solid concrete. And the paved area in the parking garage is concrete slab, which is drained which is proposed to be drained. Let me try to get to that slide. We're proposing to use area drains. And I believe, and this will show on the mechanical plans, I believe that these drains will drain into whatever the sewage disposal system is that is required by code. The building department building code classification is 5A. That means that the exterior of the building has to have a fire rating of 1 hour. The corridors have to be 1 hour. The dwelling unit separation has to be 1 hour as well. So the building itself will be protected with an automatic fire protection system. It will contain every one of the features, in fact, that were noted in the fire department's memo. But I think it's important to understand that this building construction is such that it requires it to be totally protected by an automatic fire protection, i.e. sprinkler system. And so these two buildings will have that benefit. In closing, every attempt was made to provide a project that complies, at least in spirit, with your zoning code, and it also is in full compliance with the current, which is the 2018 State of Connecticut Basic Building Code, and also the State of Connecticut Fire Safety Code. There are other related codes, such as the accessible and usable by handicapped persons, the ANSI A117.1, that apply to this project. And this project is fully designed and intended to comply with that. So in closing, it is my feeling and my sincere hope that these buildings become appropriate and become good neighbors to the existing neighborhood. And in closing, I would welcome any questions or comments regarding to the building design. Thank you very much, Commissioner.
Yes, I have a couple questions.
Mr. Mercado.
First off, building's very attractive. I like that. It fits in Cheshire well. My question is on the fully enclosed garage, is there any kind of ventilation that's running 24/7 or not for carbon monoxide and other exhaust fumes down there?
Code does require both mechanical and natural ventilation. The rear perspective and the rear elevation shows ventilation, but because the garage is fully enclosed, we have to provide mechanical ventilation. And this will show on the mechanical drawings that we submit to the building department.
Thank you.
EJ.
Mr. Bowman.
Ryan McAvoy said that the new building's approximately 6,000 square feet of roof area less than the original drawings, but that was a flat roof. With your pitched roof, could you give us, and I'm not asking for tonight, but would you give us the difference in square footage of roof area of what is there and what we have now, or what you're proposing, I should say?
I would say that there's maybe 10 to 15% more roof area in these buildings than there would be if this were a flat roof.
Could you can do a calculation for us though, because we don't have the construction drawings here and we can't do them ourselves. And the difference between a 5 and a 4 pitch is going to change that, the square footage also. So if you could get that calculation
for us, I would certainly appreciate it.
I could possibly be of some help with that. Yeah.
And your sprinkler system, is this under a residential or a commercial design?
The sprinkler system that would be proposed would be according to the requirements of NFPA 13. There is a residential called NFPA 13R. It's only slightly less restrictive than NFPA 13. I would be obviously in consultation with an automatic fire protection engineer who would lend further guidance as to how to properly and appropriately protect this building. I do know that because this is over 3 stories, that we are required to have standpipes, and I fully expect that this design will incorporate that.
Yeah, I wasn't asking for the standpipe. I was asking for the design, whether it was NFPA 13R, which is the residential, or D, which is the commercial, but that's fine. Thank you.
No further questions, Mr. Bowman?
Nope.
Okay. Anyone else? Questions on this? Okay. We moving on to the traffic study, or Mr. Williams?
Dave Sullivan, please. Thank you.
Evening. Bill, will you be putting the slides up?
I'm going to try. I wasn't able to load everything, so. You there?
Okay. Yeah, yes, I'm here.
They're on the website, Bill, under the one that says traffic impact study near the end of the list for this.
Yeah, I know that, but it didn't come up as easily as we wanted it to when I was trying to load it all this afternoon, so. Go ahead, Dave, you start. I'll see what I can do, okay?
Okay. So just for the record, my name is David Sullivan. I'm the manager of the Traffic and Transportation Planning Group at Mylona McBroom. We were happy to take this assignment where we did a traffic impact study, and as you'll see, we did a little bit of parking analysis, which I'll get to as well. We also did, which was a large part of our assignment here, was there was a number of comments, both staff level from the police department, for example, and a number from the public. So I'll try to address those and have that as part of my presentation here as well. So the first slide would just tell you that our traditional traffic impact study is an evaluation of what the existing conditions are in the environs of a site, and then we look at what the future conditions would be and what impact the development that we're studying would have on those future conditions, and the difference between the conditions with and without the development at some point in the future is essentially what the traffic impact is. So with that being said, a couple of the slides, I was going to highlight some of the important pieces of information in the report. First of all, our study area, it was primarily Waterbury Road and Hazel Drive for our impact analysis. But in addition to that, we did do automatic traffic recorder counts 24 hours by direction to also get speed data on Waterbury Road as well as on Hazel Drive, approximately between where the drive would be. Moving on, and interject some additional information as I go through this that kind of will jump the gun to some of the comments, but our future trip generation for this site. Again, we use the Institute of Transportation Engineers publication, Trip Generation, and that publication in general is a statistical model where they take like land uses and they combine those land uses and statistically say, well, if you're building this type of land use, this is how much trip it's going to generate. So our estimates based on that were 41 morning peak hour trips, 50 afternoon peak hour trips, and 620 trips all day long. There was a number of comments that had gone through going through your staff, and we had access to reading them. Some of the important things about that statistical information. Oh, there we go. We are on slide 4, Bill.
I'll get there. Right there.
There we go. So the top part of that is the trip generation findings, which I just talked about. But what's important on the trip generation to also understand is that traffic is not just generated during that 1 hour. What these numbers represent is the number of trips that would be generated for the 1 peak hour during the peak commuter period. So for example, in the afternoon, while there may be 50 trips, let's say from 4:30 to 5:30, that doesn't mean there's no more peak hour trips. There's trips that come the hour before, trips that come the hour later. This is just the highest of those hours of travel. And why might somebody say 114 units have only 50 trips, for example? Well, people have different patterns. People have different reasons for traveling at that time. The traditional thing that everybody thinks about is someone's working a 9-to-5 job and they're coming home during the PM peak hour. Well, some people work retail and are on their way out at that time, or maybe they work shift work and have gotten out at 3:30, or they're going in at 3:30 or 7 o'clock. So all those statistical things come into play to say during that heaviest peak hour, these are the numbers you should evaluate. So again, that came through a number of the comments, which I'll address at the end of the presentation. Site distances was another important part of the original traffic study. We looked at it from at 3 locations. Driveway 1, which is the southerly driveway, driveway 2, which is the northerly driveway around the corner of Hazel Drive. And then we also have on there Hazel Drive at Waterbury Road. Well, we evaluated what the travel speeds were, the 85th percentile travel speeds, and what our target or guideline site distances were. So starting with driveway 2, the requirement for the travel speed, which is about 30 miles an hour out there, it's posted 25, but they travel about 30 miles an hour, is 335 feet. When you look from that driveway in either direction, you could easily see 335 feet. Not a problem there. Driveway 1, which is the southerly driveway, we did a number of things, and Ryan actually talked a little bit about it. Right now, that driveway is largely on private property. What we did was slide that driveway onto this property, teed it up at 90 degrees, and located it where site distances would be maximized. So as it stands, the visibility for the 335 feet is there. However, on this driveway, there'll be some clearing that will need to be done along the road front, the sides of the roads, and that'll have to be maintained. So still good sight lines, but some clearing and some maintenance required. Hazel Drive at Waterbury Road, different speed, different criteria. The travel speeds there were 45 miles an hour. It's posted at 40. So as we typically find, the people are traveling faster than is posted. Most of them are. So based on that, you would need to have visibility of 500 feet in either direction. We can see 500 feet in each direction. One of the things that came out in the comments was that in the spring and in the summer, in particular, right now, you can't see 500 feet. The DOT is responsible for the sightline clearing in that area. The maintenance is not always up to snuff. As a matter of fact, there was one resident that had a comment that was on Lakeview Avenue, which said he has to routinely call DOT to get them to clear the sight lines at Lakeview. So part of our conversations that we will have with DOT will be to find out if we can get a little bit more control over the maintenance of those sight lines. Don't know if they'll let us, but I think it's important that they're aware that some critical sight lines up and down that area should be maintained a little better. But nonetheless, if they are maintained, the sight lines are adequate. Next one, Bill, please. Level of service. This is the traditional impact study. So what it says is what the level of service is today, or under today's conditions in the future, meaning a few years out after this is built. Levels of service for those that may be at home listening are basically no different than letter grades, where level of service A is very good, meaning operations are very good, and you can pretty much make some maneuvers without any delay. Level of service F is poor. It's failing. It's what you wouldn't want to get on your report card at school. Level of service C is average and typical. So what we find here is that Waterbury Road and Hazel Drive intersections, the two movements where you have to stop and wait for traffic is to take a left or a right out of Hazel Drive, which would be level of service C, in both morning and afternoon, and with and without this development. Taking a left into Hazel Drive in the eastbound direction, level of service A. So you can pull up, you do your check, you wait for a gap in the traffic, and you pull in. The two driveways would be level of service A. Next, Bill. Okay, now I'll go into the comments, and what we tried to do, because there was quite a litany of comments, and we went through them all, and some of them we had specific responses for, but what we tried to do for tonight, and I prepared a letter which was submitted on Friday. There was a lot of common themes as we went through. These are the different items, whether it was an email or letter or a comment letter, and there's a petition in there as well to stop the zone change. This is what we reviewed. There was some additional information that we reviewed this morning that came in, and it wouldn't change what we have in this presentation, because as I said, a lot of common themes were repeated throughout. So we tried to take the common themes and address them here. And like I said, we have more details to all of these common themes in our actual letter from last Friday, but I'll go through them one by one here, kind of at a higher level, and drill down as anybody needs. So next slide, Bill. Okay, probably the largest number of comments that we got were about Waterbury Road. They ranged from there's a lot of traffic and we're going to be adding traffic. What are you going to be doing to the operations on Waterbury Road? Pointing out some things that are clear and we understand, and they're existing conditions that we have evaluated, such as the merge in a westbound direction before you get to Hazel. There's a little bit of a grade on the approach to Waterbury Road from Hazel Drive. There's some queuing issues from upstream signals. The sightlines I've already talked about, which gets back to vehicular speeds, the crash history on Waterbury Road. There was some discussion about Route 70, for example, being one of the worst roads. And in fact, this is Route 801 in this area. Route 70 stops at the interchange. That's just a minor point of emphasis, but we point that out in the letter. So let me attack some of these one at a time. First, overall, when it comes to Route 70, Route 801, I'll call it Waterbury Road. It's been mentioned in the past, this is a state highway. And what's interesting about it, it's not just a state highway that's a legacy state highway. It's a state highway that's been improved within most of our memories. I believe the construction took place in the mid-2000s. So they've designed this, they built it, and there's some things in there that we're going to talk about, but we'll have to have these discussions with them for two reasons. One, they designed it, so they may have already looked at some of the alternatives that we might suggest to them. And number two, it's their road, so if we wanted to do something or suggested something, they would have to agree, and they would likely be the ones to do it. So just as we talk about all these things, I think it's just important to keep in mind that that is the case here. So what is Waterbury Road in this area? Well, the average daily traffic there is, we did a count, there's some state counts there, but generally it's in the 11 to 13,000 vehicles per day. A two-lane road, and I call it a two-lane road because it physically is at the intersection. But when you're get over maybe 9 or 10,000, then you could start feeling like a two-lane road has some congestion characteristics, particularly in peak hours. That just gives you a flavor of what this road is. And so when people characterize this as a busy road, it truly is to some extent. How are we impacting operations, and what are the operations? Well, as I indicated, we analyzed it and we looked at what it is, and essentially we're at level of service C at our intersection, and we're going to remain at level of service C. Now, I understand there's upstream and downstream queue issues. There's queuing having to do with the signal to the west in the westbound direction, but again, these are things that will have to be discussed with DOT. Are there ways that we can reduce these queues and make traffic flow better through here? But in general, what it is today would be the same with or without this development. What we could accomplish by going through the OSTA process and having this dialogue with the state is really a benefit with or without the project. There was one question about what is the method? The OSTA is the process, but what is the method? Well, when we make an application to the Office of State Traffic Administration, one of the people we copy on all correspondence, and they get copied on all correspondence from OSTA back to us, is your local traffic authority, which is your Chief Drive, who actually had some comments here. So he will be part of the process, and knowing that there's some outstanding issues here, many of what he brought up. I'm sure that before we make our application, I'd be happy to sit with them, and then we could make sure that in our cover letter to OSTA that we identify some of these things that we would like their traffic group to be aware of and work with us on evaluating them. Some of the other things, the merge at Hazel Drive, the grade coming out Hazel Drive, some of the queues, blocking visibility. So what we did is we looked to see if any of those issues, which do exist to some extent, and they exist in many places, but you want to see if they're exist to such a degree that they've become an issue that's manifested itself in safety. So we looked at our traditional 3 years of accident data at Hazel Drive, and we frankly, we didn't find any accidents at that intersection over the past 3 years. There were some accidents at other intersections upstream and downstream, but not at that particular intersection. So we said, well, let's look back. And we went back as far as the data would let us, and back to when it was a nursing home. I think we were able to go back to 1996. And from 1996 on, I believe there was 11 accidents that were in the vicinity of Hazel Drive. So the word Hazel Drive showed up. Some of those were rear end accidents. It was an off-road fixed object, but it was near Hazel Drive. So then we looked more specifically. There were 5 accidents that had anything to do with the vehicle entering or exiting Hazel Drive in over 25 years. So there really is not the symptoms of this, of any of these things that have been identified, even though they exist as observations that we agree with. They're not manifesting themselves in safety concerns. We have the sight lines and the speeds that we talked about, and I just talked about the crash history. So that's really a lot of, I guess to summarize, there was a lot of narrative about what's happening on Route 70, Route 801, Waterbury Road, and we acknowledge some of these things. We do note these things, and we will work with DOT to see if any suggestions we may have, if they would entertain them. The next category, though, if you go to the next one, is there was a number of comments having to do with the impacts on neighborhood streets, in particular Mayview Avenue and Hillside Avenue. And I think more so Mayview Avenue. So the types of comments we were hearing is the number of new cars that are going to be on their streets, the impact on operations to their streets, the width of the streets that our traffic is going to be on, things of that nature. So in summary, I won't get too far into this, but we do document it more. When we generate the traffic or determine the amount of traffic that's going to be generated by a development, our next step is to determine where it's going to be routed onto the roadways. To do that, that routing, we rely on a couple of things. One, we look at traffic volumes in the area, but more importantly, we look at census data on where people are coming and going from. And those two sources give us a pretty good idea. So what we anticipate is most of the traffic that leaves this site is going to be taking a left when they get to Waterbury Road, heading toward the interchange, and most of it's going to be coming from the interchange. All of those trips are going to be using Hazel Drive, invariably. There is no reason you would go a block or 2 blocks out of your way to take a left turn at an area, at an intersection that's inferior to Hazel Drive. Hazel Drive has a little bit of a grade as you approach, but you know, well, if it's maintained, it's got good sight lines, and it's got some paint striping to give you a little bit of an island refuge. So it's a far superior street to take a left turn from. So certainly nobody would take a left. There's a smaller amount of cars that coming and going from this site that would take a right to head westbound on Waterbury Road, and conversely take a left to come back in. In my mind, it's still far superior to go right out to Waterbury Road. Now, I can understand there may be somebody that says in the afternoon peak hour, I could beat this queue and I'm going to go the side roads and get myself all the way up to the traffic light and take a right turn there. Might that happen? There may be a small percentage at some certain times. So I'm not going to say nobody's going to go there, but those will certainly be right turners, which would have little to no impact on operations at those intersections. Hillside Avenue and Mayview Avenue. So we don't expect that there'll be a lot of new cars that are going to go on these nearby neighborhood streets, and we don't think we'll be impacting operations on those streets either. And lastly, when we did our survey of the area and of the roadway, Hazel Drive, where our cars are going to be coming and going from the elbow to Waterbury Road, is minimum 29 feet. So we got ample width for that. Next, Bill. We kind of combined these other two, I'll call it. One was the site traffic estimates. That came up a lot. I addressed it earlier in the main presentation, but not only did it come up a lot in the comments and the emails received, but it comes up a lot in my life, in all of these hearings. Unfortunately, I do too many of these hearings, and that comes up a lot. It's a concept that is difficult, not difficult, but it's not obvious initially why there would be 114 of something and it's only generating 50 cars. It's a concept that we have to explain many, many times. The other comparison or false equivalency is the number of parking spaces to the number of trips. They're really mutually exclusive because it's really not the parking spaces that are generating traffic, but the people that live in the apartments. So I won't explain that again, just other than to say it is a common comment, and hopefully I've explained it well enough. And in the written response, I think I even go to a little more detail. School buses, pedestrian environment, it was mentioned a little bit. I agree with Ryan, and I think it was, I don't know, it was Commissioner Nazardo. I think it was who mentioned that there should be a connection from the internal sidewalk to the crosswalk and the external sidewalk. I agree, and I think Ryan identified a good spot where we could put that connection so that we have a consistent pedestrian network, which gets back to the school buses and the school analyses. So we did have conversations with the town's transportation, Luther Miller. We did talk with him from the transportation department, and they pick up on Waterbury Road now. And they said if there's students on Hazel Drive, they'll pick up on Waterbury Road. So next thing we looked for was, so how do the kids get to Waterbury Road? That's when we realized there's a sidewalk it's not real obvious. You have to look hard for it because it is covered with dirt and some debris. So it needs to be daylighted a little bit, but it is there. And we're going to put that crosswalk in with the appropriate signage at the driveway so that students can get from the site safely to the sidewalk, and from the sidewalk to Waterbury Road where the bus picks up now. And the last thing, if you go to the last one, Bill, this is the parking demands. And we just tried to summarize some of the information we have. You know, philosophically, I think this is a great opportunity, being in, you know, traffic engineers historically have not been the most environmentally sensitive people in the world, widening roads and things like that, but those times have changed. And a big part of what I do now is how can you safely accommodate all modes of traffic and do that with the smallest footprint as you can. And one of the easiest ways to do that is either shared parking or deferred parking. because many times you don't need all the parking that's developed. So if we look at your regulations at 2 per unit, that's probably a good solid per unit number for a more traditional mix of units where you have 1, 2s, and 3s. In this particular case, you have such a high percentage of the efficiencies in the 1 bedrooms. There's 48 efficiencies, studio efficiencies, and 48 1 bedroom, and only 18 2 bedroom. So it's really skewed to the smaller units. The first thing we looked at was the ITE parking generation, which is a per unit without regard to the size of the units. And that gives us an average demand of 149. That's the most current statistic we have. ULI is not much older. It's maybe 6 months to a year older of a resource, but they break out the units and have a more refined estimate, and using their more refined parking rates, it would suggest that these 114 units need not much more than a space per unit, or 130 units. And then we have our own data, our own in-house data. We've counted dozens and dozens, I think over 50 or so different developments throughout the state, mostly throughout Connecticut. We do have some other data in nearby states, but we can break that out by number of bedrooms. We didn't get as refined as ULI, but when we use our data, we have a number of 143, which is our recommendation. So these would be the range of demands, 130 to 149. So we think with 183, there's enough play there that's probably all you're ever going to need at this development. But knowing that you have the ability to add another 45 spaces, I don't think you'll ever need them, but it's good to know that they're being considered now. So you want to be right parked, you don't want to be over parked, you don't want to be under parked. And I think at 183, it's right parked. So I'm sorry being so long-winded. I tried to cover as many of the comments and issues that have been brought up. Hopefully I did, but I'd be happy to elaborate on anything or try to answer any questions. Thank you.
Mr. Mercado.
The number of parking spots, the 183, I might have missed it from a few hours ago, but does that include the underground parking under the buildings, or is that just external?
I believe that's total, including.
Yes, that's interior to the buildings and exterior, yes.
Okay, anybody else? Questions?
Yes.
Sullivan, Mr. Talley.
Yep. Can you hear me okay? I'm having a little problem with my microphone.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
A couple questions. So I'm looking at the chart here. So based on 1 bedroom, 1.05 per unit. So what we've heard in the presentation previously, I think Mr. McAvoy brought it up, that for 1 bedroom unit, or I'm sorry, per bedroom, it's 1.5 people. So if you have 1 bedroom unit, odds are it's going to be 2 adults. Odds are, current society, they're going to have 2 cars. So I'm not making that correlation for the 1.05 versus having, it's not going to be 1.5 people in that bedroom. It's going to be 2.
Yeah.
How does that correlate?
I can.
Let me start, if you don't mind. I think it's a little bit of another one of these false equivalencies, because the statistics are being generated for different reasons. So the most direct correlation we have between the size of a unit and the number of cars is the number of cars. What you're throwing in between there is average people, average car ownership. You're throwing in other variables, which are they may have some correlation, but they're not the direct correlation. So let's just theoretically take how do we get from 1.5 to 1.2, which is our 1 bedroom statistic? Well, there's kids, for example. So some of those 2 units might be a child. There might be 2 people that have a single car. You know, if they're going into a rental apartment, for example, and they're a little bit, and they're going to it because their income is such that they're qualifying, chances are that 2 people may not have 2 cars. So, you know, again, once you throw these other variables in, you start diluting the correlation. The statistics that we're showing you here are direct correlations of the size of the unit versus the number of cars that were counted at those units. So that's my most direct way of responding.
Bill, can you go to slide 9? Okay, question for you too. So full disclosure, I've been up there a bunch of times. I wanted to see at different times of the day what the traffic patterns were and everything else. And just, again, for full disclosure, I made a couple recommendations through planning and zoning. The apartment complex, as soon as you drive in on the right, they do use where the sidewalk is under leaves and everything. They do use that for overflow parking. So, you know, I think I should probably look at something along those lines if we're going to add a whole bunch of cars there. So, you know, Bill and I talked about that. He's going to bring that up. Also, in both the reports, including the traffic study, it says the state DOT is responsible for the brush or the overgrowth on both sides. And, you know, one of the things that I brought up too is you have 2 property owners that own corner lots, and per our regulations, they're responsible. So for the sight lines there. So that's something else that I just wanted to bring up. Disclose that, you know, we brought that up. But when you're doing the sight lines, if you look at this picture, you see the white line where the stop sign is. Are you doing your sight lines from there? Do you do them from the edge of the road, or where do you do the sight lines from?
Well, see the white lines on the right side of Waterbury Road?
Okay.
That's the shoulder line.
Yep.
So if you do a projection of that shoulder line and come back 15 feet into the intersection, that's where the measurement is. So usually you hope the stop bar is pretty close to where you want it to stop. But theoretically, if they stop at the stop bar, then there are bumpers at the stop bar, and they're, you know, depending on your car. So most people will go and edge up, and you measure it typically between 10 and 15 feet. So you start at 15, and in some situations you can go to 10 if there's some obstruction at 15 feet. But that's where the calculation starts.
And I know that you already talked about the sight lines. This afternoon when I was up there, I was at that stop line, and the line of sight to the right was 0. I couldn't see the road. I couldn't see the guardrail. I couldn't see anything. And to get out, I mean, I had to go literally out into traffic to make a turn. So definitely when you're talking to the DOT, that's got to be out, because that's dangerous. I mean, it's dangerous, period.
You know, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt that maybe with everything going on, you know, their maintenance schedule has slipped, but that should be cleared. There's no doubt.
Absolutely should.
When did you do the sightlines for that area when you're looking there? What time of year?
Well, we did most of this study late February into early March.
So
we did our counts, I think, that about a week before the governor's pandemic moment. That's when we did our data collection. Sightline measurements were probably around then.
So when the foliage wasn't on the trees.
Correct. Correct.
And I just, you know, you brought up about the parking spots again. So I know I brought it up before. Sorry, I'm going to bring it up again. But you know, for my fellow commissioners, I want to know if I'm out on an island here, or you know, what your thoughts are on the 183 versus the 228. If anybody has any comments.
Can I actually ask a question about that? I know that we have 183 parking spaces now. If we were to go ahead and increase it to the maximum allowed by our regulations, do you have any idea how much we'd be increasing the impervious surface?
Let me take a quick calculation on that, because we wouldn't be adding any aisle width. So it's just basically 9 by 18 space times 45. That's around 7,300 square feet of asphalt.
And I don't know if you have anything by comparison, but would you consider that to be a significant increase?
Well, by way of comparison, I would say a typical footprint of a residential house is somewhere around 1,500 square feet. So you're talking about 6 houses worth of impervious surface. That represents 20% of the overall parking spaces shown. You know, reason why we depict the plan showing them is because we can build them. We just don't believe that the data shows that they're going to be necessary. And you know, frankly, you know,
Right.
it's our position that it would be a waste of asphalt. Essentially.
Thank you. And I think to respond to Commissioner Natale's point, at least on that sense, I think one of the things that we should keep into consideration as well is just the environmental impact of this project, and increasing that is something that I do have concerns about. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, on the shared parking, Jeff, you make a good point, but remember, they need to park the site in order to rent all the units here. If they're unsuccessful, if they don't have sufficient parking, you got market rate units in here, they won't be able to rent the site. So it's not as if somehow they're getting away with something. If it turns out there isn't sufficient parking, and they start parking in the fire aisles and so forth, you can easily require them to do it at that time. So it's not a giveaway. It's a temporary it could be a temporary situation. If it doesn't succeed, then you have the ability to you know, require them to put the parking in. It's not, you're not giving this away permanently, unless if it's determined by the commission that it's not working, then you can require them to build the additional parking. So there's no permanent giveaway here. All they're asking for is a stay to see if their numbers work, to see if they're able to function out here with that level of parking. So
Bill, when I look at the picture on the screen here, I mentioned that there's other developments in Cheshire that have inadequate parking. Both of these pictures you see, the apartment building up on the top of the page,
yeah,
cars are parked there, not in parking spots. There's no parking spots there. I drove up there. The one down at the bottom there, when you first take a drive on the Waterbury Road, I mentioned the cars that are parked across the street because they don't have enough parking. So my concern again is, in the past, we've approved complexes that supposedly, according to the statistics, the parking spaces are adequate. And just in this block, you're seeing 2 others that don't have adequate parking.
yeah, except the difference would be in the case of the new project, you have the ability to require them to build additional parking. With these 2 projects here, you have no ability to do that. And I can't speak to either one of these projects. They're long before our time, yours and mine. So there's no deferred parking there. There's whatever was approved at the time versus whatever's being used. And both of these look fairly inefficient, even in terms of layout. But at least in this case, you have the ability to have the parking constructed. The only, you know, the concern we generally have and what we generally tell developers is don't build any more than you need, because of the environmental impact, as just been mentioned. But you have the ability to require them to do it. You don't have to require to get either one of these other projects to do anything, but you would in the case of this project at least, is to get that parking if it turns out that it's needed for them to do it. That's the only point I want to make.
Gotcha. I just don't want to looking at these 2 others again, way before our time. I just want to make sure that we're not repeating past mistakes where they probably had, you know, they met the guidelines back then, but now they don't. So they're parking.
And again, though, they don't have any deferred parking area on there, so we really can't do anything about them. In this case, you would. That's the only point I'm making to you.
So who monitors these cars if they're parked out in the street, and who makes a determination that we want to go back and have those parking spots added? And how do we make sure that that's written so that we could do that?
Well, the regulations could already require that. The fire department's out there frequently. The police department's out there frequently by code. The fire marshal has, these are multifamily buildings. They have to be inspected annually by the fire department. We would know. So, and not only that, they're trying to build a product here that, you know, what are the market rents? 2,400. I mean, you're trying to build a desirable place for people to live, which will include enabling them to park. And that's, so you have to, you know, don't forget that part. So.
Yeah, 2 points, if I may. Bill's correct that that would be the point at which we would come to you and tell you that we wanted to put the additional spaces in if it was insufficient, because we do want to be able to rent the units. Second thing is town records show that those two other apartment buildings were built in 1963, which I believe predates zoning. So I have no idea what the requirement is. I mean, we don't disagree that it seems like they're light on the parking spaces required, but that doesn't change what the current data shows, which is that 1.6 we believe is plenty. But if it's not plenty, we can put in the others when we get to that point.
I have one question going back. If you're all set, Mr. Natale, but if you're not, we have ample time to ask this. Going back to, you said when it was the 100 units triggered the OSTA requirements. I was just curious if does OSTA, when they look at parking, would they? I thought you tried to answer this, but I wasn't really sure. But if they look at the 183 spaces instead of the 228 or whatever it's supposed to be, does that trigger anything with OSTA? Like, wow, there's a lot more parking spaces here, the 228 rather than the 183, or they just go by the number of units that are in the building?
They go by either or. So if we had 99 units, it would make a difference of whether we had 183 or 228. But since we have over 100 units, it doesn't make a difference because we hit the unit trigger. So we could have no parking and it would trigger the same review.
But it doesn't change anything in the review to say like over 200 spaces, a different review requirement for the streets.
No.
83 and
Nope.
220 doesn't matter at all.
It's exactly the same, other than the table that's put on the plan will have 228. I think it'll have 228 in any case, to tell you the truth. But on the plan, that would be showed as future parking.
Okay. Any other questions for the traffic study?
Yeah, I got one.
Mr. Selma.
How many of those parking spaces were the garage parking spots? Out of the 183, how many were under that first level there?
Right, you want to take that?
Sorry, I was on mute. We have 28 spaces per building on the interior, so a total of 56.
Okay. And Jeff, I agree with you completely. With the parking, I know what the statistics say. I know what our regulations say. I lived in a condo. You've got girlfriends and guests, and the garages can turn into storage. Nobody actually parks in them. I've always said more is better than not enough, or more is better than what the piece of paper says. And to RJ's point too, it's, there is an environmental concern, but I like to see more than adequate for parking, just to be sure. The fact that there's a deferment and we could always add to it, that's pretty big. But generally, I'd like to see more as myself. That's all.
Okay, any other commission members? Questions on the parking? We do have a lot of public comments to read in tonight too, so I don't know what else is to do for the presentation, but we're gonna have to get to the public comments very soon. So, Mr. Williams, I don't know what you have left in your presentation, but can we get to it?
Yes, thank you. We'll save any other wrapping up comments or responses, Mr. Chairman, because I have a feeling you're going to continue the hearing anyway, so we can do that another time.
My next point, there's going to be plenty of other opportunity for the public hearing.
Sure. So that's all from us for now. Thank you for your patience and for your questions.
Okay.
One brief question.
Sure. I wasn't cutting anybody off. I just didn't know what was going on. So go ahead, Mr.
I was just gonna mention that I think the northern side extra parking, it was probably half of that, wouldn't really have an environmental impact. On water it does, but you're not going into any of the open land that's left there. That's already just grass area that you'd be removing. So maybe you split the difference.
Okay. Mr. Tedesco.
Very briefly, do you have any sense of what the traffic would have been with the convalescent home? How many trips that might have generated?
I don't, but I could certainly find that out. And I'm assuming there'll be another hearing, so I could report back on that.
Thank you.
Okay, any other commission members with questions? No? Bill, would you like to get to some of the public comments?
Mr. Chairman, that would be Suzanne, and we want to have some sort of a cutoff in terms of, while she's reading, she's probably going to, anything that comes in after she starts, we could probably reserve until the next meeting. How would that sound?
That sounds good to me.
Okay,
'cause
so
I
we can let her get started? Yeah.
reading the ones we started already, I've seen that, a lot of the complaints are the same thing over and over again, and they're valid complaints. We understand that. So any of the new stuff, and can we please?
So anything from this point on, we'll save for next time. Suzanne's going to start to read, okay?
Okay, yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The commission has received 2 petitions. The first petition is petition to postpone the virtual public hearing until such time as an in-person hearing can take place. This received 221 signatures and was received by the Cheshire Planning Department, stamped July 8th, 2020. Second petition is a petition to stop zone change, 50 Hazel Drive, and it reads, "We, the undersigned, oppose the zone change that would allow the owner developers to construct 114 apartments on this property. Key reasons for opposition: increase in traffic, Route 70 is already hazardous, the site of many accidents. An increase of 114 to 200 cars accessing Hazel Drive project is a major issue that needs much further study. Destruction of trees and displacement of natural habitat of birds, turtles, swans, herons, and egrets. Increased strain on school system. Multi-dwelling complex in the time of COVID-19, the multi-unit towers proposed do not make sense. We respectfully request to delay the review of the proposal until such time an in-person meeting with public comments can be held." This received 95 signatures and was received by the Cheshire Planning Office and stamped on July 8th, 2020. Public comments received to the commission. First from Denise Baston, July 2nd, 2020. "My name is Denise Baston. My husband and I purchased our home at 105 Lakeview Avenue in 1991. We currently live here with our 3 grown children and my elderly mother. We, as well as many neighbors, are quite distraught about a zoning change building proposal recently brought to our attention, Hazel Drive project. We've been working diligently and tirelessly since receiving such notice to research and understand all of the ramifications of this. Due to the COVID situation, though, we have found that many avenues for research, information, and data gathering have been either closed to us or extremely limited. To compound this hindrance is the fact that very little time was afforded us for the time of notification to the time of the scheduled meeting. It has come to our attention that apparently an Inland Wetlands and Watercourses town meeting has already taken place on June 16th, 2020. This occurred without any of us whose property would be directly affected being notified. We are now being told that the continuation of this meeting scheduled for July 6th, 2020 will be closed to the public. We have many questions and concerns, some of which are in regards to traffic, property lines, natural habitat protection, and our rights as landowners who pay additional taxes for the pond view, which would be devastated if this went through. The most urgent and time-sensitive of our requests is to have the Hazel Drive special permit application hearing removed from the Planning and Zoning meeting agenda currently scheduled for July 13th, 2020. In light of COVID, this meeting is currently set up for public access to be made available through live streaming on YouTube. We feel that in-person interaction with our town officials is necessary to convey our deep concerns with this proposed development and zone change. We are aware that some public town meetings are being allowed to take place in other towns, such as Southington, and more importantly here in Cheshire. In light of this, we do not understand why this option is being refused to us. Many of us on Lakeview Avenue have lived here 30+ years and have invested much money and work into the improvement of our homes simply because we love and enjoy the beauty, privacy, and natural serenity of our surroundings. We've raised our families here. Some have even grown up here and decided to remain here due to the beautiful setting. In order for you to fully understand our point of view, along with our neighbors, emphatically, we ask you to please visit our properties and the proposed site. We believe by doing so, you would be able to clearly see for yourself the validity of our concerns and how devastating this would be for us were this to go through. Respectfully, Denise Baston and family. Second correspondence received from Denise Baston, July 8th, 2020, provides more detail. Dear Chairman Kurtz, my family and I respectfully acknowledge the members of the Cheshire Planning and Zoning Commission would like to express our appreciation for your service to the town as well as your endeavor to do what's best for Cheshire. We understand this can be challenging, especially during the unprecedented and most anxiety-filled time with the COVID-19 pandemic and this time of civil unrest in our country. Currently, there is a Hazel Drive special permit application hearing scheduled for July 13th, 2020. In light of COVID, this meeting is currently set up for public access to be made available through live streaming on YouTube. We feel that in-person interaction with our town officials is necessary to convey our deep feelings, our deep concerns with the proposed zone change 114 units multi-story development. We are aware that other town meetings are being held publicly with limitations and do not understand why we are not being afforded the same opportunity. We urge the Planning and Zoning Commission to postpone the virtual public hearing scheduled for July 13, 2020 until such time as an in-person public hearing can take place. If the hearing is not postponed and takes place as currently scheduled on July 13, 2020, I would like to add my following comments to be read into the minutes records of the hearing. We, as residents of Lakeview Avenue, strongly oppose the proposed zone change request by Lamp Realty Group that would allow the owner's developers to construct 114 apartments on the Hazel Drive property. Listed below are just some of our serious concerns. Traffic. Route 70, Waterbury Road, is already horrible and dangerous. Anyone who lives in the area or travels through knows this to be true. During peak travel hours, it regularly bottlenecks as drivers exit 84 West to Route 26 in hopes to avoid 84 West congestion. This, in addition to the normal Cheshire town traffic combined with traffic coming from Woolkit, Prospect, Waterbury, only compounds the dangerous and difficult driving conditions in the area. Exiting from adjacent neighborhoods is difficult and dangerous to say the least. Oftentimes, we are literally blocked by exiting our street by standstill traffic. As a result, we see many accidents at this section of Route 70, Waterbury Road. Route 70 on the whole was ranked in Cheshire Herald, January 18, 2019, edition as the third most dangerous road in Cheshire. Regarding potential traffic created due to the proposed project, to say that a 114-unit complex with 184 plus parking spaces, minimum required, will yield only 50 extra cars trafficking in and out of Hazel is ridiculous. From the meeting of the Cheshire Town Council public hearing held Tuesday, July 12, 2016, please see Mr. Volker's response when asked about any laws which would supersede more than 8 houses in regards to a $3 million appropriation on Chapman property. In response, Mr. Volker cited the fact that the property would be attractive under Section 8-30G of the Connecticut General Statutes, which overrides local zoning regulations. There would be higher density proposed for this property by developers. The property could support 150 plus housing units that would not come under local zoning regulations, but under Connecticut General Statutes, Section 80-30G. Regarding traffic patterns, Mr. Volker said the ball fields have events and traffic comes into the site and leaves. For 8 housing units on a daily basis, traffic would be 65 to 70 trips in and out of the site. For 150 plus housing units with children, families coming and going, 6 trips per day per family, that would be 900 trips per day. Following this method of calculation, the Hazel Drive site proposed 114 units based only on 1 vehicle per unit, not feasible. Traveling only 1 round trip daily, highly unlikely, in itself would be 228 daily trips. More feasibly, there would be 2 drivers per unit for at least half of the 114 units and half also families with children coming and going for at least 4 trips a day. Still conservatively, this would yield 456 trips per day. How can all of this coming and going from substandard roads that can barely accommodate two-way traffic safely and dumping onto already congested, accident-prone stretch of Route 70 not be considered a significant safety issue? More concerns due to traffic. The safety of students at bus stops who must wait at the end of their street where it meets with Route 70 because buses cannot go down the streets. This is already dangerous. It's alarming to consider how much more dangerous this will become with the additional 200+ cars exiting and entering. Next section, school town services. This will bring an increased strain on the school system, especially during a time of necessity to decrease student class size due to COVID-19 social distancing regulations, as well as put an increased strain on town services. Concerns similar to those were expressed in the Chapman meeting minutes and certainly would be of greater weight during this current pandemic. The potential for a project such as this was so undesirable even back in 2016 that Cheshire Planning and Zoning voted to purchase the land for the town, and it was acknowledged as foresight of the town council to purchase the subject property for use. And contained is a quote, Kevin Wetmore, 103 Stonegate Court, represented the offices of the Board of Director of Stonegate, a 32 residential 55+ housing development. The board supports purchase of this property as best use for the town. If there were to be 150 housing units with children, more educational and town services would be required. With the final plans for this property, Mr. Wetmore asked that there be discussion with Stonegate about a buffer for the projects. He acknowledged the foresight of the town council to purchase the property for town use. Next section, nature and wildlife. Destruction of trees and natural landscape, destruction of natural habitat for swans, herons, egrets, owls, wild turkey, multiple variations of birds, turtles, foxes, coyotes, bobcats, deers, bears, and moose. These issues of land and habitat destruction are of great and personal significance to us because it is for these reasons that we chose this property for our home. When we purchased our home on Lakeview Avenue over 29 years ago, the house was undesirable. But it was the quiet serenity and natural beauty of the surrounding landscape, in addition to the quaintness of the neighborhood's single-family country setting, that convinced us to buy this house and make it our home. Since that time, we've invested significant work and money into the improvement of our home and property, all the while cherishing the beauty of our surroundings and the joy of watching wildlife in its undisturbed habitat. If the proposal were to go through, we would suffer the loss of privacy, the loss of desirable view of the pond with the current tree and shrub buffer line, a view for which we pay additional viewing privilege taxes, and incur the negative effects that this would have on our property value. Lastly, during this time of COVID-19 pandemic, the proposed multi-unit towers do not make sense and furthermore would be undesirable when social distancing is the current guidelines we've all been requested to adhere to. I thank you in advance for giving your sincere consideration to all of our concerns. Respectfully, Denise Baston and family. Next is a communication from Linda Batza, dated July 1st, 2020. I live at 105 Lakeview Avenue in Cheshire. I'm concerned about the Planning and Zoning meeting being held on July 13th, 2020. I am asking that item number 4, special permit application of Lamp Realty, be removed from the agenda. Platform for this meeting does not allow for any real-time participation and therefore limits our rights to state our case. While the legal notice does not offer the opportunity for public comments, this provides us no way to rebut them. We have many concerns and questions regarding the zoning change and have no guarantee that these will be heard or addressed with this platform. If this project was going to be put in your backyard, would you not demand the opportunity to speak your concern in person? I'm sure that you would want to be fair and allow all concerned parties to be able to interact and not just view on public access. I'm asking that you remove this agenda from the item until all parties can meet in person and present their point of view. Thank you for your consideration. Linda Batza. Next communication, also from Linda Batza, dated July 8th, 2020, Town of Cheshire Planning and Zoning. I'm 75 years old, and I live at 105 Lakeview Avenue for 17 years. What I've always loved about my home is the peace and quiet and privacy in this little corner of Cheshire. However, this proposed project for Hazel Drive, this will come to an end. Imagine 114 things with over 100 windows facing your backyard. Add that to the 30 cars shining their lights as you enter and exit the garage. There seems to be no concern or thought for the neighbors around this project or residents it could bring in. They will build, make money, and go home to their unchanged and undisturbed neighborhood homes. Sit back and relax while we deal with all the added traffic, loss of privacy, and all of the negative effects that this project is going to bring us. Here is a list of reasons I am against this project. Traffic. Per Yukon, Connecticut Crash Data Repository report, Route 70 is the third in the list of 10 most dangerous roads in Cheshire already, adding from 114 to 200 cars to that, and you may have accidents waiting to happen. ART counts stated in the Dropbox Traffic Impact Study shows average daily traffic at 11.119 vehicles on Waterbury Road and 53 on Hazel Drive. Add to the 41 to 50 cars, which this project reports, and we will have 100 plus cars trying to merge into an already dangerous Waterbury Road. How many lives does that put in danger? They propose only 41 to 50 trips in and out of a 114 apartment complex. It's probably more likely to be anywhere for 114 to 200. Consider the fact that almost every apartment will have a car, some two. Otherwise, why the need for 228 parking spaces as per documents? Minutes of the Cheshire Town Council public hearing held Tuesday, July 12, 2016. Regarding traffic patterns, Mr. Volker said that the ball fields have events and traffic comes into the site and leaves. For 8 housing units on a daily basis, traffic would be 65 to 70 trips in and out of the site. For 150 housing units with children, families coming and going daily, 6 trips per day per family, there would be 900 trips each day. How does this measure up? 65 to 70 trips for 8 houses with ball fields to 41 to 50 for a 114 apartment complex. Residents spent too much time, as we all know, sitting in traffic. Time they could spend with their families or working. On Fridays, we don't even go out after 2 p.m. because we spend too much time wasting time trying to get out of our street. Safety. What about the pedestrian? If only 41 to 50 car trips, as proposed in the traffic study, in and out, that leaves 64, 1 person to apartment, but more likely 128, 2 people to apartment, pedestrians, with no sidewalks and substandard roads on Hazel Drive and no sidewalks on Waterbury Road. This project brings an enormous safety hazard. In lockbox, the document titled Need for Affordable Housing Memo with Exhibits Part 1 PDFF states that the proposed development likely add just 4 or 5 children into the public school system. Yet, per study by Economics and Housing Policy National Association of Home Builders, there are 49.6 school-age children per 100 renter-occupied units. Consider 50-plus children on substandard roads with no sidewalks, walking to get to the school bus on the 3rd most dangerous road in Cheshire. How many lives of children does that put in danger? Strain on school system. While it's also noted in the same document that public school enrollment in Cheshire is down, it is not known how well COVID-19 changes the class sizes. The American Federation of Teachers has revealed a 22-page report with recommendations due to COVID-19 for smaller class sizes. The union says class sizes of 24 or more students in a small classroom pose obvious risks to student health and safety. Class sizes of 12 to 15 students could make it possible to maintain physical distancing protocols. This project, with possible 50-plus school-age children, will only add to the strain on our school systems. Wildlife. Impact to local wildlife. Much wildlife, including egrets, swans, ducks, geese, live or visit Larson Pond in the wetlands. The pond has turtles that come up on land and lay their eggs in the spring. There are also hawks, woodpeckers, bears, coyotes, bobcats, robins, and others. This project will destroy their habitat and continue to impact the wildlife. This proposed project will also destroy countless trees. As I stated in the beginning of this letter, the reason I enjoy living here is because of the privacy, but also the visual qualities. With this apartment complex, the visual qualities are greatly diminished for neighbors pondside and others. Instead of enjoying the vision we now have with the beautiful tree-lined pond, we will see the back of an apartment complex. And if I understand correctly, the map provided, we will also see people walking along the trail, further invading our privacy. All in all, this project will endanger not only the existing residents, but also the residents that it could bring in. Respectfully, Linda Basta. Comment received from Kathleen Caitlin, dated July 1st, 2020. A concept for multi-family housing has been presented for the west side of Larson Pond on Hazel Drive adjacent to Waterbury Road. For the reasons below, this is a bad idea. 2 buildings provide 114 housing units, would require a zone change and severely impact Cheshire's open space. In recent years, the town purchased land to provide open space for hiking and dog walking. The area is larger than the sign at the entrance, but the entire area still feels like someone else's backyard. Larson's Pond is stream-fed, high heavy rain, and prone to flooding. Foundations to support buildings with 114 family units would be questionable and unstable. I think of cracking, crumbling basements under $500,000 homes in the Vernon area. Local traffic is congested and dangerous. People have been killed before the addition of 114 new families. Widening the roads would compromise most of the homes in the neighborhood. Tax base, school books should not cost $400. What about the bears? More desperate animals will put more people at risk on the Bear Highway. The COVID conveniently keeps us as a closed door, the Planning and Zoning Board meeting, but increasing the population density by 114 will increase the COVID threat. Please reconsider this zoning change. Sincerely, Michael and Kathy Caitlin. A comment from Rochelle Crino, and that was sent July 6th, 2020. Good evening. I'm emailing to ask for your support in opposing the proposal for 114-unit apartment complex in my small, quiet neighborhood off Hazel Drive. I ask that you seriously consider the size and scope of this proposal. A development half the proposed size would be a much better fit for the area. Below, I have outlined my concerns about and reasons to propose a development of this size and scope in this particular area of Cheshire. The proposed development is too grand for the neighborhood to safely sustain it. Thank you. And she goes on to list. There is already dangerous egress-ingress from an existing high-traffic area. Route 70 just off of exit 21 on I-84 is a very high-traffic area in our town, and our small neighborhood is just off Route 70. According to the traffic study, there are over 13,000 cars that drive past our neighborhood on Route 70 every day. Just as a car approaches our neighborhood from the south, Route 70 goes from 3 lanes to 1, which results in bottlenecking and congestion. This congestion makes egress and ingress very difficult and dangerous. It's extremely difficult to safely take a left-hand turn onto Route 70 possible during rush hour. According to the same traffic study, there have been 14 accidents in a 3-year period on the small stretch of Route 70. The proposed development plans include between 189 and 220 parking spaces, adding over 150 vehicles into the traffic pattern of the area, which will cause backups of our narrow neighborhood roads and add to the existing dangerous traffic situation. The neighborhood streets are short, very narrow, and have no sidewalks. School buses do not drive down our neighborhood streets. The developers have not submitted recommendations on how to address the traffic issues. Can current systems support a complex of this size? Before decisions are made to approve this proposed development or not, consideration of the sewer system, waste management system, public safety system, ecological system, and school system should be analyzed. There was a proposal made for this property back in 2005 for a much smaller development. Sewer capabilities and wetland lines were questioned as part of this proposal. Due to the topography of the area, there's an abundance of wildlife and aquatic life that will be dispersed and displaced due to such a large-scale development. Will the development of this affect school enrollment, particularly Darcy and Doolittle? The immediate neighborhood is suburban and composed of all single-family residences. I ask that you take a few rides through the neighborhood to see for yourself. And that is signed from Rochelle Crino. Message from Danielle Danielson. This was sent July 8th, 2020. To whom it may concern. My husband and I are members of the community and are currently raising 2 young children here. I am writing to you with a variety of concerns that we have regarding the proposed zoning change at 50 Hazel Drive, Cheshire. We respectfully ask that you please delay the permit application hearing from the Planning and Zoning meeting agenda, which is currently scheduled for July 13th, 2020, to a later date. We ask this because we believe it's imperative to hold a meeting on a date where community members can be given the opportunity to actively participate and voice concerns and questions in public. Respectfully, Adam and Danielle Danielson. Next is a comment to the Commission from Robin Emond, and this is dated July 8th, 2020. Honorable members of the Planning and Zoning Commission, I will start by saying I am adamantly opposed to this zone change and massive project at 50 Hazel Drive. I would like my comments to be read into the record and that this zone change be denied. This proposal will forever change the integrity of the neighborhood of the predominantly single-family homes in a waterfront country setting. This area is not conducive to high-density living. WalkScore rates it a 14 car dependent. I read the statements in the letter from the attorney for this project. They state that Hazel Drive already has existing apartments. What they failed to address is that those were built in 1963 prior to any zoning regulations, which were enacted in 1970. I fear that changing the zoning at 50 Hazel would set a precedent for the grandfathered in apartment buildings to expand and continue these massive affordable housing units to fill their properties. This is a tranquil, quiet country neighborhood setting. Question, why this area? There are many apartment buildings around town. Shouldn't affordable housing be in a walkable area close to town amenities? Why not build affordable housing on West Main Street where the apartments are up there, or maybe convert the Ball and Socket to affordable housing, or maybe on Creamery or Stonehill or numerous other suitable areas, or the Chapman property? Why not in your backyard? Why does the Upper West End, as our town likes to separate us from the rest of town and call us Cheshire Heights, even though we pay the same mill rate, get treated substandard from the rest of town? Why is entering Cheshire sign on I-84 bridge and not on the town line up near Edgecombe and Stately Stairs? In 2005, Pond View of Cheshire LLC proposed a zoning change to build Larson Pond Landing, a 44-unit age-restricted condominium building. The zoning board prior to this project and during the meeting for this project changed and defined zoning regulations to help them to conform to the proposal on this property. With a lot of deliberation and reconfiguring this proposal, their plans were approved. Those plans assured us that the buildings would not expand beyond 44 units or from the footprint of the existing building. They also removed one floor to keep with the aesthetic of the neighborhood. That was approved. Once that was approved, the developer sold off the property to Lamp Realty LLC to build that approved project. The building was complementary to the homes in the neighborhood. Since that time, many homes in the neighborhood, especially those on the Pond and Lakeview Avenue side, have made large investments into their homes with the knowledge of the approved age-restricted condos as the plans were accepted. Now we are looking at yet another zone change. Again, the zoning board has changed zoning regulations last year to accommodate the project. This project must follow the guidelines of affordable housing, regardless whether the state controls this. This proposal is being submitted at a time of a state of emergency because of the COVID pandemic and Governor Lamont's executive orders. This is not fair to the residents of this area, as we are unable to adequately represent ourselves with limited access to information, virtual meetings, and especially this meeting on July 13th, 2020, being a virtual meeting where the town council is having an open public meeting the same evening. This time we were not adequately notified with certified letters informing us of the proposed project prior to any meeting. We were mailed letters, some got them, some did not. Inland Wetlands had their public meeting without our knowledge of anything happening up on this property, even though it abuts our properties. I find it very peculiar that this application was submitted at this particular time, especially since the town had knowledge of the proposed project. Question: what are the time limitations to take action on this project? Does the fact that there are no meetings in August factor into the time limitation, if there is any? Again, why are these meetings being held virtually? Neighborhood town of Southington is having open public meetings. The Cheshire Town Council is having an open public meeting on the 14th. I'm requesting that this meeting be postponed until there can be an in-person, unlimited occupancy open meeting. That the meetings remain open for the purpose of evidentiary hearings. That they incorporate by reference applications, minutes from all meetings, decisions and permits with conditions by reference to include all technical studies, including but not limited to traffic and sewer capabilities of the project that was approved in 2005 for the property at 50 Hazel Drive. That the members of the Zoning Commission visit not only the site, but the neighborhood. Taxes. The property that abut the lake pay an extra 15% waterfront property tax. The properties that are across the street from the lake on Lakeview pay a view tax. This project will not enhance the property tax base. Conversely, it will be a burden to the town, adding to the school system with upwards of 300 kids, busing sidewalks to the neighborhood on a very narrow road with homes already built to their property lines. Question: is the town going to remove those taxes from the properties, since we'll now be viewing two enormous 4-story apartment complexes? Will the town and state now force people to sell their homes at market value, low market value, to reconfigure roads and intersections to accommodate this project? Considering this project is listed as affordable housing, will the project be funded with grants from the state of Connecticut or the town? Will they get a reduced tax rate for affordable housing? Will the town benefit from the state financially? Qualifications for renters. In the application, it states that studio apartments and 1-bedroom apartments will be offered to those with income up to $54,000 per year and 2-bedroom units with income up to $65,000 a year. Question: is there a minimum income of the applicants? Is there a limit of occupants per unit studio, bedroom, and 2-bedroom? Is there a limit to pets? Is it non-smoking? The ecosystem. Now, to address the ecological impact of the area, the lake and forest around and behind the lake is home to an incredible amount of wildlife. We have seen box turtle, painted turtle, snapping turtle, snakes, frogs, newt, bass, perch, bluegill, pickerel. Then there are otter that feed on the huge mussels in the lake. A bald eagle was seen on the lake with an osprey, blue heron, loon, egret, swan, geese, kingfisher, mallards, wood duck, bufflehead ducks, and abundance of every type of bird that you can imagine. We've also had fox, bear, turkey, coyote, and bobcat. We even had a moose and a mountain lion on our properties. Living on this lake with the forest behind us is like living in a wildlife sanctuary. The neighborhood residents make a great effort to preserve the area and maintain the ecosystem. Question: what would the effect be when massive amounts of forest are removed and wildlife is displaced? What will happen when 300 plus children are living around a large open body of water and wetlands that need to be preserved besides the safety of those children? Traffic. We live on the corner of Waterbury Road and Lakeview Avenue. The traffic on this road is very congested. The speed limit is set at 40 miles an hour, but the traffic runs at 45 to 50 miles an hour when there is light traffic. Rush hour in the morning and evening is unbearable already. Pulling out of our driveway could take up to 10 minutes, even more if the traffic is tied up and no one lets you out. I call the state periodically for them to cut back brush from our sight line. Pulling out of Lakeview, Hazel, Hillside, and Mayview is even more difficult with the uphill exiting and/or horrible sight lines from those roads. I can tell what time it is every morning when I hear the school bus beeping its horn to alert cars as they blow by with the red lights flashing and safety bar extended. I also recall a tragic accident embedded in my mind as if it were yesterday. A motorcycle crested the hill coming down and past I-84 West entrance ramp when a truck pulled out of the commuter lot and ran him over, killing him. Yes, that was one of the few fatalities up here, but there are numerous accidents. Adding 200 plus cars to the mix, entering from substandard side streets with an average of 6 trips a day is going to make this area even more dangerous. I understand that there is pressure for affordable housing in town. I also know that the town already worked to help this project to be buildable and passed age-restricted 55 and older condos. I say stay with those plans and make 20% of those condos affordable. I keep hearing that 55 and older condos are not desirable anymore. That is untrue. My sister just last year was looking for age-restricted condos in Southington to the Prospect area. It took her a year to find one. As soon as they go on the market, they are sold. Question: the town approves many moderate to high-end developments around the town. If we are lacking affordable housing, then why hasn't it been addressed with developments that continue to be built in town? Just as the town requires open space when developments go in, now why not require affordable housing in the mix instead of sticking it to one side of town with massive structures in small, quaint residential neighborhoods? Why not let the town do affordable housing and go on the Chapman property? That's a more suitable area. Why isn't the town looking to put affordable housing on the north end where there's already proposed developing projects? Is it that the town does not want it to be visible in town, so they're pushing it to an undesirable west end? The cost to the town and state to upgrade roads, sightlines, etc. will be enormous. This is our tax dollars paying to devalue our own properties, the properties that many of us have been investing and paying our fair share of for 20, 30, 40, 60 plus years, pouring our hearts and souls, taking pride in our homes and properties. I'm asking that you please take all questions and requests into consideration. Respectfully, Robin Edmonds. Next is a correspondence from Stanley Edmond Jr., dated July 8th, 2020. Honorable members of the Planning and Zoning Commission, thank you for allowing us to have our voices heard. I request that my comments be read into the record. This is a life-altering decision you have in your hands. I believe that the residents in Cheshire Heights area, as I've heard it called by town officials in a demeaning way many times, would appreciate if the antique sign entering Cheshire be moved to the proper location at its actual town line. That aside, I feel myself railroaded by improper notification, the use of the COVID pandemic to limit our time to get proper legal advice and experts to try and stop this zoning change for yet a second time. I request that the meetings remain open for the purpose of evidentiary hearings. I ask that the zone change be denied. I understand that the state requires that the town have 10% affordable housing available to date, and we only have 3%. The federal government has limited power over state, and the state has limited power over the town. Is the town getting funding to accept this, or is the town being extorted? Meaning, does the town get money to accept this, or is the town being threatened to lose funding if they do not? So the question is, why are all of the monster home developments allowed to continue for all those years without addressing this on each project? I do not have a problem with the first zone change that occurred in 2005. The property owner should continue with that project, possibly implementing 20% of those condo units to be categorized as affordable housing for 55 and older occupied. I'm requesting that they incorporate by reference applications, minutes from all meetings, decisions, and permit conditions by reference to include but not limited to traffic and sewer capabilities of the project that was approved in 2005 for the property at Hazel Drive. Now, in my view, the negatives: security, notification, impact on the investments in my property, 30 years paying waterfront taxes, one zone change already at 55 Hazel Drive, town roads inadequate, state road inadequate, upgrades to the fire department, burden on the school system, burden on the sewer system, destruction of the ecosystem, dumpsters and rodents, danger with children on the lake and wetland destruction. The positives: town gets a bump up in their affordable housing compliance at the expense of Cheshire Heights. The property owner makes a home run, all at the expense of every homeowner west of the I-84 bridge. Respectfully, Stanley Edmond Jr. The next communication is from Dennis Fox. This is dated July 7th, 2020. Dear Chairman Kurtz, first I thank you and the members of the Cheshire Planning and Zoning Commission for your service to our town. The Commission has a responsibility to balance growth and development in keeping with character of the town while ensuring proper land use. I'm certain you cannot make all of the people happy all of the time. I urge the Planning and Zoning Commission to postpone the virtual public hearing scheduled for July 13th, 2020 for a zone change at 50 Hazel Drive until such a time as an in-person meeting can occur. I cite a minimum of these two precedents. Number one, the property tax payment deadline to avoid delinquency, normally ran July 31st in any given year, has been extended to October 1st, 2020. Second, the deadline to pay the dog tax has been extended until July 31st, 2020. I surmise that the COVID-19 pandemic has created financial turmoil for town citizens, and/or citizens can't visit town hall to make payments in person. Surely, if something as trivial as a dog license can be postponed, a hearing to provide public impact on a project with major lifelong ramifications, such as Lakeside of Cheshire, can be postponed until such a time that the public may have in-person representation at a proper hearing, not just virtually. Should a decision be made not to postpone this scheduled meeting, I'd like my comments read into the record. I also make a request that the zone change be denied. I oppose the zone change required to develop property at 50 Hazel Drive with two 57-unit buildings for a total of 114 units. This is a massive project that would forever change this section of my hometown. With the exception of a few years in my 20s, I'm a lifelong resident at 56 Lakeview Avenue. This area is home to my family and to a host of terrific people, many of whom have been here a very long time. I've invested significant money to improve my home and my property, specifically because of the zoning in place at the time of my investment. A zone change of this magnitude would have negative effects on my property value and those near me in this section of town. The reasons for my opposition are: since I-84's reconfiguration and reconstruction around 2003, traffic moving onto Waterbury Road during normal morning and evening rush hours is difficult as it is. Taking a left out of Lakeview Avenue is a minutes-long, frustrating activity during these times. It's more than inconvenient. Traffic backs up in the afternoon and evening from Blackie's to below the bridges carrying I-84 over Waterbury Road. When the exit ramp signal turns red, cars immediately begin flowing up from below I-84. When the western-bound Waterbury Road signal turns red, traffic immediately flows off exit 26 from I-84. There's no getting out. Traffic studies cited the application called Waterbury Road a minor arterial. Mylona McBroom's traffic study estimates an additional maximum of 50 trips at evening rush in and out of this proposed 114-unit complex. This is interesting in the light of comments made by Mr. Volker in a town council meeting held on July 12, 2016, when debating the purchase of the Chapman property opposite Cheshire High School and noting the possibility of 150 units or even 8 individual homes developed there. The following is the quote. Mr. White asked about any laws which would supersede more than 8 houses. In response, Mr. Volker cited that this property would be attractive under Section 80-30G of the Connecticut General Statutes, which overrides local zoning regulations. There could be higher density proposed for this property by developers. The property could support 150 housing units that would not come under local zoning regulations, but under Connecticut General Statute, Section 80-30G. Regarding traffic patterns, Mr. Volker said that the ball fields have events and traffic comes into the site and leaves. For 8 housing units on a daily basis, traffic would be 65 to 70 trips in and out of the site. For 150 plus housing units with children, families coming and going daily, 6 trips per family per day. That would be 900 trips per day. At the time, traffic was cited as a major reason for not allowing private investment in this property. The other reason was, God forbid, an affordable housing development might be developed there. How on earth could 8 housing units generate 65 to 70 trips and 114 units on Lakeside of Cheshire generate only 50? Chairman Kurtz, I'd suggest one of the estimates isn't correct. I'd further suggest that a traffic estimate included with Lakeside of Cheshire's plans is the one that's off considerably. To suggest only 50 trips would be made in and out of Hazel Drive development with 114 units is a bit of an underestimate. Further, Lamp Realty suggests that they would defer 45 parking spaces unless required to build the additional 228 required for this property. For a traffic study to suggest that only a combined 50 trips will be made into and out of Hazel Drive by 228 vehicles at peak rush is not realistic in my view. If only 183 parking spaces are built, the study suggests that a third of the vehicles, 50, would be in use at evening rush at any given day. Again, not realistic. In 13 years of waiting on school buses at the end of Lakeview Avenue, I've witnessed no less than 60 incidents of cars passing a stopped school bus with lights flashing and the red stop to the full extension of the driver's side. That's a conservative estimate at 5 per school year. Lori, the elementary school bus driver, would confirm this statement. This safety issue would be exacerbated by this huge development. With the exception of 2 small apartment buildings built in 1963 on Hazel Drive, this entire area is comprised of single-family homes nestled on postage stamp-sized lots. An enormous multifamily development does not fit here. Lakeside of Cheshire's two behemoth of buildings will destroy the character of this neighborhood from I-84 to Waterbury and Woket Town lines. I beg the Planning and Zoning Commission members to walk the property, all of it, including the property at the terminus of Larson Avenue. I believe that this property at the end of Larson Avenue has septic tanks formerly operated by New Lakeview Convalescent Home, aka the Greenery, that have not been decommissioned, a fact not referenced in meetings of the recently held Inland Wetlands and Watercourses meeting. I also encourage the commission members to drive their cars around the neighborhood of Hillside Avenue, Mayview Avenue, Hazel Drive, Hollis Avenue, Hall Drive, Lakeview Avenue, Edgecombe Road, and Rita Avenue. Try taking a left out of any of these streets from 6:30 a.m. to 8:30 a.m. and from 4:30 to 6 p.m. Perhaps it's easier now during COVID, but I assure you in normal times, it is a take your life in your hands affair. A backup of 4 or 5 cars getting out of Hazel Drive will cause drivers to flee up the hill to Mayview and Hillside Avenues. This would be devastating for my neighbors across the pond. Come see for yourselves. Walk, drive, observe for yourselves at 5:25 p.m. on a weekday evening before a zone change hearing is held. Come now. The vegetation in the area has not yet been trimmed by the state DOT. That might happen once a year. Lines of sight are compromised for sure. Thank you for hearing and understanding my concerns. Respectfully, Dennis Fox. Next communication is from Jeff Repko. This was sent on June 18th. And this was sent to the applicant's attorney. Hi, Joe. I think the largest concern is the safety of our streets. Wait, I'm sorry. Yes. You referenced the file, but it doesn't show us if there's a new traffic flow involved. There are way too many vehicles driving up Route 70 as it is. My feeling is that the proposal will add a minimum of 400 more vehicles going by our street daily. Again, this is a very low minimum in my opinion, but using it for the sake of argument. My wife and 4-year-old daughter were almost killed by getting T-boned by a vehicle flying up the same side Hazel is on. So obviously this whole situation is very important to my family and our safety. People leaving the new complex would also start using our side street to avoid the main street as much as possible. This would cripple the traffic flow of Mayview and so on. The side roads are not made to handle 2 cars going down at the same time as it is. I don't think the company you are representing or the town of Cheshire will want the media coverage lawsuits of something awful happening to our children or ourselves due to traffic just to make a profit. I've attached my wife to this email so you can communicate through one thread. We will present with our feelings at the next hearing, and I'm sure many neighbors will as well. Please let me know if you have any other information that we can be informed of changes and so on. And that is from Jeff Repko. Another communication from Jessica Repko, dated July 1st, 2020. I am writing as a very concerned neighbor on Mayview Avenue, directly affected by this proposed apartment complex. As someone who's lived in the area for many years and dealt directly with the traffic issues, I think it is preposterous that a complex with 185 parking spaces is even being entertained. The fact that traffic issues are being downplayed is grossly negligent and unacceptable. Our roads are so narrow that mailboxes are delegated to one side of the street and school buses are not permitted to pick up our children, but it's somehow okay to be adding hundreds of cars without even adding a stoplight. Unacceptable. My car has already been totaled, leaving our street with my 4-year-old in the back seat because people fly up Route 70 at crazy speeds. My elderly parents that live in town help with my children after school, and it has gotten to the point that they don't feel safe leaving the neighborhood at rush hour because of how dangerous the traffic has become. We've been voicing this concern for almost 10 years now, and it's fallen on deaf ears. Despite what the traffic study may say, it is definitely not safe to be adding hundreds more cars to these small streets, especially without a reconstruction of traffic or lights at the very least. What is also very concerning is the fact that this has been snuck in under our noses under the cover of COVID. How residents are not even able to attend any meeting just seems a little too convenient. How is this legal? No one informed me of the wetlands meeting in June. and we were not able to voice our concern. Now, the planning and zoning meeting is being held on YouTube, and a town employee, who is obviously for this project because it's all about those tax dollars, right, will be our voice. Again, totally unfair and unacceptable. We are asking that we hold this portion of the planning and zoning meeting in person so we can voice our concerns. We are seeking legal counsel because it is totally unjust that the community is not able to be involved in what's going on in our backyard. Thank you for your time. Jessica Repko. Next communication is from Judith Sliz, and this is dated July 13th, 2020. And this is regarding the Hazel Drive application. Please approve the above project that includes affordable housing units. We are in need of affordable housing in Cheshire to accommodate local individuals, couples, and families who work in town but cannot afford to purchase a home here at market price. Many of these folks are employed as teachers, social service professionals, police officers, as well as people working in service industries like grocery stores, pharmacies, home health organizations. We need many more units than proposed for the Hazel Drive project, but approving this project would indicate good intentions and some action toward provision of adequate affordable housing in town. I hope you will take responsibility to do the right thing in this case. Please approve the project. Sincerely, Judith Sliz. Next communication is from Elizabeth York, and this is dated July 9th. Dear Chairman Kurtz, I request that the following be read into the record of the public hearing to be held on July 13th, 2020. Thank you for your dedication and service to the citizens of the town of Cheshire. Yours is a difficult task. There is a need to maintain all that makes Cheshire, the town of Cheshire, a wonderful place to live and that is attractive to current and potential citizens. There is a need to manage growth and development to maintain the character and quality of life that we enjoy. There are times when issues arise that are not conducive to inclusive discussion among all affected parties. This is such a time. The current pandemic has resulted in restrictions to the size of gatherings. Currently, indoor gatherings, and I assume meetings, are limited to 25 people with an indication that in mid-July the size will be increased to 50 people. Also, currently, there's a number of businesses open, examples of which include gyms and fitness centers, movie theaters, libraries, museums, zoo, etc. It appears reasonable to assume that this public hearing could have been conducted as a hearing with an audience. It is my understanding that there are upcoming town meetings that will be held with an audience as soon as the following day, July 14th. A major issue that has arisen from this pandemic is the inability of significant portions of our population to access the electronic alternatives that have arisen for meetings, education, medical interactions, etc. My concern is that a significant number of parties with an interest in the outcome of this hearing will not have the ability to participate. These proposals have material implications for the neighborhood surrounding and the proposed development for which the above referenced public hearing is being held. Simply put, there are a number of affected parties that are not aware of this proposal, that are not aware of the implications, and equally, if not important, will not have the ability to provide you with their input for inclusion in your deliberations. Additionally, it is my understanding that the petition and application has long-term implications for future development within the town of Cheshire that should be considered and resolved before approval. Accordingly, I respectfully request that the July 13th, 2020 public hearing be postponed until a later date, as an in-person meeting can be held where you can hear from what I believe will be a much larger number of constituents as to their thoughts and concerns about the petition and application to be considered at that meeting. I also request a postponement so that I can complete an evidentiary review of documents related to the petition and application. In my opinion, I have not had significant notice to acquire and review the documents. In addition, there were meetings related to the petition and application that I was not informed of in the same matter as the public hearing. I was not notified of the public hearing via letters from the applicants. I was notified of the public hearing via letters from the applicant's attorney, one of which included a copy of its legal notice. And the limited time I have noted some issues that I felt should be addressed, some of which you will find later in this letter. Comments and concerns. There are quite a few pages in support of affordable housing within the document submitted by the applicant, so much so that I assume that this is considered to be a key selling point. Among all the verbiage, statistics, and data, there are two critical items that I believe deserve significant consideration in your deliberations. Page 2, Section 3.3 of the document titled Need for Affordable Housing Memo with Exhibits Part A notes that the Central Naugatuck Valley Regional Plan of Conservation and Development 2008, known as the plan, recommends promoting the construction of decent, attractive, and affordable housing options, emphasis added. It further notes, another recommendation is to combat the stigma of affordable housing by requiring quality and attractive affordable housing units. Why do I feel they are critical? Because they strike to the core of what is needed. The population that would benefit from this requirement are looking to obtain what was attracted to us in our neighborhood space, tranquility, safety, etc. They are not looking to duplicate the conditions they seek to escape from. They are looking for and should have access to safe streets on which to travel, open space around their residences, and the ability to have flower or vegetable gardens, a green space where the children can play safely, quality education, etc. All the things that currently exist within our section of town. There is also the issue of design challenges in response to what we have learned so far during the current pandemic. Would it not be prudent to hit the pause button and at least put some thought to developing issues such as increased unit size to provide for social distancing and anticipated increase in working from home as well as homeschooling, provision of neutral zones in hallways and shared spaces requiring deep sanitation, detailing with the need to decontaminate doorknobs and other touch points, treating airflow through HVAC units, etc. You will undoubtedly hear from my neighbors concerning about the density of the project, the increased traffic associated as a result of the required 228 parking spaces. There's been discussion of 114 spaces. However, the parking requirements specified on the first page of the document package titled Plans Revised 5/29/20 is stated that 228 spaces, as well as other aesthetic issues. For example, there have been comments about the postage stamp sized properties in our neighborhood. During this pandemic, when we have been advised to shelter in place, those postage stamps have proven to be extremely important, providing an area of safety, solace, and serenity. We've been able to interact with family and friends and neighbors while maintaining social distance and not confined to some small enclosed space. You will also hear questions as to traffic studies conducted when we have been required to minimize trips, schools are closed, and many people are working from home, ordering home deliveries, etc. How valid are the results of the traffic study under such conditions? How can you read a reasoned conclusion when you know the study conditions were abnormal and tend to result in an understatement of the activity? Those of us who live in the area have experienced the impact of high traffic volume on the stretch below exit 26 westbound of I-84 up to the traffic light at Costco entrance. This was not just a weekday issue, but an issue at various points in time on the weekends as a result of trips to Costco and Kohl's. The area around Costco and Kohl's will continue to experience development, whether the trap rock mining operation on that stretch of the road. When the operation ends, there will be some form of development. During the WPCA meeting held April 23, 2020, there was discussion about the expected sewer flows from the proposed development. The standard residential development sewage flow normally used when considering such developments was stated to be 206 gallons per day, and the result expectation from the proposed development was 23,484 gallons a day. After discussions, it was thought to be appropriate to use a different flow estimate because of the number of smaller units. As a result of those discussions, the estimate was dropped from 23,484 gallons per day to 12,005 gallons per day, 11,479 gallons per day below the standard estimate. What have we learned during this pandemic is we need more scrupulous hand washing, more intense cleaning of our surroundings, which would include more detailed cleaning in and around the developing of particular common areas. And the fact that we are all spending more time in and around our homes. Think of the showers that used to take place at the gym now take place at home after our walks and jogs. This would support a higher water use than what's commonly used before the pandemic. It appears that this should be revisited. I also noted some concerns about the impact upon the system if the actual flows were higher than the lower projected within the minutes. And regarding water, just think of the recent emergency announcements we received in recent weeks from the Regional Water Authority. Request that the public hearing currently scheduled for July 13th, 2020 be postponed and continued to provide the opportunity for all affected parties to comment, including those living on the surrounding streets as they will be impacted by the proposed project too. That the Commission strongly considered the need to have this and any new developments state how their proposals address the recommendations to promote the construction of a decent, attractive, and affordable housing unit, and to combat the stigma of affordable housing by requiring quality and attractive affordable housing units. That the traffic study be redone when the traffic flows return to their normal patterns to confirm that the study was based on the total parking area of 228 spaces and not some lesser number, and to verify the consideration of additional developments within this area. That the Commission take a look at, discuss, and obtain confidence that the WPCA approval for the estimated sewage flow capacity of 12,005 gallons per day instead of the 23,484 gallons per day estimated using the standard residential development flow calculation is reasonable and appropriate given the new environment we are now in. I note the recent emergency communications, plural, from the Regional Water Authority noting that the impact of significant increase in water usage. 5, that the strong consideration be given to reducing the proposed development. There appears to be a growing need for space now and going forward. I thank you for your consideration. Respectfully, Gary Carter. Okay.
Excuse me,
Yeah.
Suzanne, may I break in for 1 second? Mr.
Yes.
Chairman? Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Could I ask how many more comments we have? And could I also ask that we do stop the comments at this point in time and suspend the meeting or stop the meeting and continue for the next time, because it's getting late. And I think we're at the point of diminishing returns. I'm at the point of.
So, Mr. Chairman, I have one comment left to read that was submitted on July 9th that the Commission received. When I started speaking, I had checked the voicemail. We didn't receive any voicemails as of 7:15, but as of 5:45, we did receive 18 comments by 8 individuals, and now I see that there's an additional 6 comments since I started speaking.
You know what?
So would you like me to finish up with?
Yeah, it's getting kind of late. We're not that we don't want to hear this stuff, but
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move that we suspend the meeting.
Well, I can't suspend the meetings. I got to do the next meeting. But
And stop. I move that we stop the meeting and continue at the next scheduled meeting.
Okay, well, that's what we'll do then. That was a lot of work. Sorry for that. Every comment that does come in will be read into the record. I promise you. It's just getting very late, and I actually have one other thing to do with that said. So with that, thank everybody for your participation tonight, and I will take a motion to adjourn the public hearing.
Continue, Mr. Chairman, until the 27th.
Yeah, we're continuing the public hearing, but we still have to adjourn tonight's
Right.
public. So, anyone, motion?
I move that we
Roll
adjourn.
second by Mr. Linder. All those in favor?
I'll second it.
Okay,
I'll second it. I'll second it. I'll second it.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, real quick, guys, just, I have the other meeting already going. I'm gonna open it. Basically, have the minutes from the public hearing and special meeting from 6/22/2000. Moved by Mr. Vitale. Mercado. Any discussion on these minutes? No. All those in favor? Motion. Aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstaining? Okay. Okay, as far as the stuff from Arnett Talbot, we haven't had time to read it. You guys all got it in your packet. Get it done. We'll try and get it for. Other than that, we have anything else to come before the? I think.
Mr. Chairman.
I put all in a post regular. Okay. Come on, it's time to go home. Rolo, seconded by Mr. Natale, Mr. Picado, sorry. All those in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Thank you all. Late night. See you next.